All right, it's 10 o'clock. So we'll get started. Welcome everybody to day two of Product Camp Online. Today, the first presenter is Steve Johnson. He'll be talking about how to innovate your planning process. So Steve, take it over.
All right, thank you. So you want to buy a baby elephant. I mean, who doesn't, right? So you go down to the baby elephant store and you say, "Yeah, I'll take that one there." And you bring it home and you put it in the backyard. And before you know it, it starts wandering around the neighborhood. So you go back to the baby elephant store and go, "Dude, what am I going to do?" And this baby elephant salesperson says, "Oh yeah, you need this chain and this stake if you don't have a fenced yard." So you bring your baby elephant home and you put a chain around its leg and you stake him to the ground, and that way he doesn't run all over the neighborhood, and that works fine. But at some point the baby elephant grows up and doesn't realize that he's now stronger than the chain and the stake. He's learned to stay in the backyard. And I feel like a lot of companies I encounter have that problem. We set up all these processes 3 or 4, 5, 8 years ago, and now we're a bigger company, or we're a different company, or we've adopted new methodologies, and yet we haven't really changed our system. And that's why I find a lot of product planning is in total chaos. And so my question for you today is, if your process it's not really a question, is it? The statement today is, if your process isn't achieving its desired outcomes, then it's time to change your process. And in fact, Ed Deming said, if you can't describe what you're doing as a process, you don't know what you're doing. And a lot of us don't. In a survey from last year, 47% indicated that process was the biggest challenge for product management in their company. And in all areas, they have an ad hoc life cycle process, they have an ill-defined innovation process, and mostly they have inconsistent process for managing the portfolio. Everybody does it differently. And as a result, products get released through individual heroics, despite the process. It seems to me that if it weren't for the heroic efforts of the product manager and the dev lead and the product marketing people, despite the company's best effort to prevent it, it's like we would never get products out. So we need some process. Now, I worked for a large company. It was huge. It was $1 billion software company. We had so much process, we couldn't get anything done. And I got recruited into a startup, and I went there and I was super excited about it because there's no process in the way. We can just do whatever. And a week later, I was pulling my hair out because, oh my gosh, there's no process here. So we need some process. We need something more than a cocktail napkin to go from idea to success. And unfortunately, one of the things that I'm seeing right now that is really bothersome is a continued mindset, particularly in executives, that building products is factory work. You just wait for their wonderful ideas to come by on the assembly line, and you plug a few things together out of a library, and boom, you have a product. And over the last few years, we've done a really good job of proceduralizing the describing the product and creating the product by implementing things like design thinking and story mapping and agile methods and SAFe, which I don't really consider an agile method. But you know what we haven't done? We've really focused on create. We haven't focused so much on discovery of problems and successful delivery. With today's methods, we can create the wrong product faster than ever. And what I'm hearing from my customers is we've perfected the build process. We've got DevOps in place. We're doing Agile. The team is working better than ever. And now we're realizing we're building the wrong product. And let me say, let me make a note on this particular knife. This has become a trope. I mean, I've seen it in many presentations. I've been using this example for quite a while. I think it's hysterical. It feels like every enterprise product I have ever seen And you can see it. It's like the sales guy said, oh, I talked to a guy who wants a screwdriver on the knife. I talked to a guy who wants pliers on the knife. I talked to somebody who wants a whatever, and we keep adding and adding and adding. But the truth of this knife is this is actually a photograph. It's not a drawing. It's not a prototype. For their 100th anniversary, the Swiss Army people made about 1,000 knives with every blade they had ever made, with the intent of selling it like to a knife store, which would have been really cool, right? And so I thought, well, hell, I'm going to go buy one of these things. And my wife said, well, why? I mean, it's super expensive. And secondly, you can't take it anywhere. I mean, you wouldn't be able to get it through security. And third, it wouldn't actually be any good in any of its functions. I mean, you couldn't actually use it. And it feels to me like our processes today lean this way. This is the feature factory mindset. The sales guy who comes in and says, I might be able to close a deal if you commit to add this feature. The executive who stops by and says, God spoke to me in a dream and we've got to have this feature. And we don't seem to have a process that looks at what are we actually trying to accomplish and for whom. Rogers and Edgett back in 2012 said simply having a process is itself a best practice. But the thing is, other people's processes may not be what's best for you. So when I ask people how they describe their product process, they use terms like ad hoc, inconsistent, sometimes standard. And so what happens is we'll hire somebody new in the PMO or somebody who's got a lot of project management experience, and they say, okay, great, let's build a process. And it almost always looks like this. We'll do step 1, step 2, step 3, step 4. We'll have all these gates along the way. We're going to have these phases. We're going to have these meetings and ceremonies and artifacts. And we'll have all this perfect information and political buy-in from everybody. It'll be great. And the problem with this sort of linear way of thinking is learning occurs only at the beginning and the end. And there's so much in the middle where we are basing our decisions based on old learning. And so a few years ago, we all jumped on the train for Lean Startup. And Lean Startup says, well, okay, let's just build some stuff. We'll measure how it does. We'll learn from that. We'll build some more stuff. But the thing is, there's more to product than build. So I recast this thing into these phases. We go through a discovery phase, a describe phase, and a deliver phase. With discovery, you're trying to find problems to solve. And I can't believe I've been saying this for 25 years, but the core of our decisions need to be problems. And yet everybody in our organization brings us features. Can you build me this feature? Can you build me this feature? And half the time, as a developer, as a former developer, I don't even know what they're asking for. So it's hard for me to implement something when all I have is a how statement. What I need is understanding of the problem. Then we need to describe that problem to our creation teams around the concept of personas and their problems. And then we're ready to prepare delivering those solutions to market. And at the core is continuous learning. You discover and learn, you describe and learn, you deliver and learn. And then in between these steps, after you discover, you get your organization to commit with business deliverables. And that is to say, we're getting ready to go do this thing. Do I have funding? We're getting ready to go do this thing. Do I have resources? And then we describe the solution and we're ready to start creating. And then we prepare to deliver the product so that ultimately we can connect with our customers and increase the adoption and growth of our product. And again, learning is at the core. It's always a good time to interview clients, perform retrospectives, and optimize your processes. So what I've shared with you, we have come to call the Quartz Open Framework. We built it with a team of independent consultants like myself. You can learn more about the Quartz Open Framework at, interestingly, quartzopenframework.com. And the thing is, you're probably building products similar to this, but you're likely to have one product in the definition stage and one product in the description stage and one product in the delivery stage. So it's not like you always start at the beginning, because there is no beginning. It's a ring, right? I remember years ago, I was brought on board to launch a product, and I was talking to the development team. And I said, why are you bringing me on now? And they said, well, to be honest with you, we just want somebody to blame when this goes badly. As our company grows larger, we start specializing our roles, and we might have multiple products in the discovery and commit phase. And we might have multiple products that are being built and prepared for market, and then another bunch that are preparing for launch. So you'll have multiple iterations within each phase. So this framework is kind of like a method of methods. So we have, like, in the describe and create phase, we've got design thinking and story mapping and agile methods. In the go-to-market or the connect stuff, you have your sales methods and your marketing methods and your launch methods. And so this plugs into a lot of the methods that you're using today. And it provides us, I think, it provides us a logical structure that you can use to define a 21st century process. Serious Decisions reported a few years ago that high growth organizations are twice as likely as low growth ones to have and use standard deliverables in the innovation and go-to-market process. So what are your standard deliverables? And here's the tool. Taking this chart, looking at the different colors there, what is your process? And said differently, interesting. First, we want to discover problems, then we want to commit to solve them, then we want to describe the problems, design and build solutions, prepare the organization to launch the product, and then ultimately connect with the product. And how do you know what to fill in? Well, the answer is you're doing all of these things. You're doing a bunch of product-related activities and more and more and more and more. And you just write down all the things that you're doing and use that tool to organize them into a logical process. After all these years, many firms still lack clarity on what product management should do, and so we end up doing everything. And the good news is there are lots of good product management frameworks. And some of these people are exhibiting here at this conference. And you can look at these frameworks and say, well, yeah, we need to do this and this and this and this and this, and then put them into your process. So use this canvas as a way of defining what are the standard deliverables for your process from idea to market. Let me take a pause here because I talked a lot. Let me open it up to some questions. Anybody have some notes they want to have me speak to?
So from the chat, I've not seen any question come up.
Okay.
Just a
And Hector said many companies fail to retire products. And I think that's partially because we fail to continue learning, right? We start learning from our win-loss analysis and from our product metrics that this product isn't doing well. So we need to go through this whole cycle again. We've discovered this problem. What are we going to do? We're going to get executives to commit to retiring the product. And that means we're going to have to describe all the mechanics of how we're going to do that and walk around this wheel step by step for a launch that is really an unlaunch, right? Retiring a product. So this is the, sure.
Just the interaction of the chart here, the side kind of repeats the same that's in the hexagons? I'm trying to figure out what is the interaction between the boxes and the hexagons, because they're basically the same.
They are the same, and I'm gonna show you that actually on the next slide.
Okay.
So hey, nice setup, well done. So using this canvas, I worked with a team for an enterprise SaaS product, and this is what they called out. They had 3 or 4 or 5 things in each category. As they looked at their activities and they looked at their ceremonies and they looked at their primary deliverables, you can walk around this framework and see in the discover column, they do, customer discovery, which we've all, I hope, heard of. We define the problem. They do a thing called opportunity scoring. And from that, they build a product canvas. And they take the product canvas to the leadership team to do an executive briefing and say, hey, shall I take this thing further? And then they go into more detailed market validation, financial model, clarifying their success criteria or their OKRs, and then they do a full business plan. And so if you think about all of the activities that you're doing, or think about all of the activities that need doing, they should fit nicely into one of these areas. And the work that I do is working with teams to define those steps. What are those key elements? And so I've developed this thing I call the no chaos process, because again, so many of us are pretty chaotic and inconsistent in the way we build things. So we start by interviewing and observing customers, really face-to-face or video face-to-face, so that we can isolate problems and personas. And then we identify our abilities to solve those using a technique called Aspire. Then we brief our executive teams and say, I found this problem. I'd like the go-ahead to take it to the next level. And I've built this one pager that describes what this problem opportunity is for you to say, go, no go. And then I'll go into doing, whatever business planning is necessary, but at minimum, creating a one-page canvas, calculating the opportunity score so I can compare multiple things, and then getting the go-ahead to engage with development. Then we go into describe, with describing problems and personas, defining the acceptance criteria for each of the stories, road mapping your epics or your initiatives, and then briefing the technical teams. And they go off and start building. And here we get into, looking at what will a successful release look like. We'll use Kanban to prioritize the work. We'll formalize discovery and acceptance, and then we'll minimize interference and change. One of the biggest issues that product managers can contribute to, I said that wrong. One of the biggest contributions product managers can make during the create phase is to tell everybody to just shut the hell up for a while. One of my favorite stories, I was working with a president who said, our development team is terrible. You've got to fix it. And so I went to development and found out what was really going on was the president was coming in every week and saying, all right, stop what you're working on. I'm giving you, here are some new requirements. The problem wasn't with development at all. Then we get into preparing to deliver to market, where we'll align our launches with market rhythms. We'll determine what's necessary for our launch activities. We'll use Kanban to prioritize the launch work the same way we did the creation work. And then we'll brief our go-to-market team so that they can ultimately connect with the market. And then we'll set up market feedback. We'll monitor our success metrics and our OKRs. And then product marketing will do win-loss analysis to see what's working and what isn't. And then at the end of that process, we'll perform a process retrospective and then do it all again. So that's my definition of a pretty, it seems like a lot, but it isn't really a lot, a pretty simple process for going from idea to market in an unchaotic way. And the challenge for you is to say, well, what do we need to do? I mean, here's the thing. Other people's best practices are not necessarily the best for you. just because the company across the street did it a certain way doesn't really matter unless it works for you. What I found is that every company is unique. Different people, different goals, different vision, different products. And so your process should be unique as well. So looking at all the activities that we talked about earlier that we typically do in product management, all of them find a home somewhere in your canvas. And what I want to do is, ultimately, your goal in product management is to systematically turn good ideas into successful products following the smallest amount of process you can get away with. You want to have a quick memory. I was working with a team, actually, whose company name you would recognize. They had a 27-page diagram of their ideation process from idea to market. And nobody could remember any of the details. It was horrific. And they simplified it to something more like what I described in my no chaos process. Now, this process is also described in my book, Turn Ideas into Products, where I talk about this way of thinking, as well as implementing a consistent policing role, if you will, called product ops. That is to say, product ops is emerging as a role similar to DevOps that is focused on helping larger teams become consistent in their deliverables. So you can learn more about that book on my website at turnideasintoproducts.info. And that's how you innovate your planning process. You start over. You say, you know what, what's been working here and what hasn't been working? Let's start doing more of the stuff that's working and stop doing some of the things that aren't working.
So should I?
Let me open it up here.
I've noted down the questions that came up. The first question is, what are the best ways to discovery, capture, and continuously uncover dependencies between products?
Well, the best way to discover is to actually have a conversation with a real person. The number one way to get good market feedback is by observing a customer trying to do their jobs with or without your product. The second way is interviewing them. And actually, interestingly, the third great source of market information is the product team, the development team. They know so many ways to improve the experience for customers, as long as the product manager has made it clear who the customer actually is. The three worst ways of getting market input, the three least reliable ways, are executive mandates, ideas from the sales team, and the company portal for ideas. And I had an experience a few years ago that was hysterical. The president announced in one of my training sessions, the president announced that any idea was a great idea, put it in the portal, and the product managers will all build a business case for every idea. And I was standing next to one of the lead developers who burst out laughing and leaned over to me and said, oh yeah, product management's never leaving the building again. They're just going to be working on business cases all day long. So the best way to get discovery, the best way to do customer discovery is to spend time with customers, firsthand experience. What was the rest of that question, Ramesh?
Oh, yeah, that was the first question. The second question was, do you have any thresholds on feature size or impact which would determine whether you employ this process?
It's, I would use this process for anything large enough to require additional investment. That is to say, we want to add a simple feature to the next release, that just goes through traditional backlog grooming that would happen within the describe and create phase. But we're getting ready to completely rethink the product, or we're moving from on-prem to in the cloud, or we've got a new product idea. So any super large epic, or any new product idea, or maybe a product idea that's ultimately going to be an option to an existing product, warrants going through this. But you know what? It doesn't have to be development work. It could be marketing work. I mean, we could go through that same process saying, you know what, we need to build a new website. And you're like, okay, well, why do we need to do that? What is the problem that we're trying to solve? Let's get commitment from leadership that we should go ahead and do that. Let's describe it to our agency that's going to build our website. They're going to create it. We're going to prepare the market. We're going to prepare the sales team. Then we're going to launch it. So the metaphor seems to work for almost any substantial sized project.
Okay. The next one you may have already answered, but I'll still ask the question.
Okay.
Do you use this framework for just new products, or also smaller projects like new features and initiatives?
I would use it for large features and initiatives. I wouldn't use it for, I would use it for something that is epic or bigger.
Okay. Okay. The last question I have here is, how does the burst model differ from the full model?
I'm sorry, say that again.
How does the burst model differ from the full model? Burst, B-U-R-S-T, burst model?
I see the question. I don't understand the question. I don't know what the burst model is.
Okay.
Is it maybe it's something I said poorly? I'm not sure. Let me go back here. This was the model I showed. This was the model I showed for an enterprise SaaS size company. And this is the model that I showed for, sorry. This is the model that I showed for my own process, the no chaos process.
Okay. Looks like it was a side conversation. So there is another question that came up is, what's the best way to integrate this method when you have existing products and also thinking of new product ideas?
This is a way of inventorying, I guess, the methods or the ceremonies or the artifacts you're doing today, and then questioning, do the things that we're doing today make sense? Let me do it another way. I was doing a training a while back, and somebody in the room said, well, Steve, what do you put in an MRD? And, an MRD is sometimes called a market requirements document, usually called a marketing requirements document, which always bothered me because marketing doesn't have requirements. They don't use our products. But anyway, the person in the room said, well, what we put in MRD is this. And they started ticking off a bunch of things. And somebody said, whoa, you're describing a PRD. And I went, okay, well, what goes in a PRD? And they're like, okay, it's this and this and this and this. And somebody else says, no, you're describing a BRD. And I'm like, okay, well, what goes in that? And they're like, this and this and this and this. And somebody else says, no, that's a feature requirement spec, an FRS. And they had all these documents that were largely duplicative. They had tons of artifacts and nobody was reading them. So if you look at the successes in your company, look at your last release or look at your last new product introduction and say, what did we do right in that process? This tool helps you encode it in a way that you look at each step and say, well, I don't actually know why we do this. Or, maybe instead of a business case, all we need is a one-page canvas, right? Instead of an MRD, a PRD, a FRD, a CYARD, we just need, one big backlog. So you can use this as a retrospective tool to help you understand what are you doing or what should you be doing going forward, in order to simplify what is often an extremely complex process that very few people can understand. And again, I have found most of the organizations I work with have a process that no one can describe and no one follows, and everybody just kind of does their own thing. The introduction of product ops, a lot of product ops teams are using this as a blank slate. Let's look at what does and does not work for us. Let's articulate it in a simple recursive form, and let's not be so linear. You know, I mean, building products is not a line, it's a wheel.
Okay, I don't have any more questions in the chat. So if anybody has any questions, you can either ask them directly or put it in the chat. Oh, I think we have 5 more minutes.
Okay. Chris, you got a question?
I do, Steve. Great presentation, great overview. I'd love for you to elaborate, if you could, this clearly process oriented relative to examples you had shown from pragmatic, serious decisions, the other frameworks, and how you see the differences in where to apply some of those. I mean, we just get inundated with frameworks, right? And they're all great, right? How do you think about them relative to each other?
Oh, that's a tricky question. Well, they're all doing an important service of saying what all has to be done. I mean, to me, it's really frustrating working with new product managers because they've been given almost no guidance on how to do the job. And so they become reactive, they become waiters. Somebody comes in and says, I have this request, would you please process it for me? And they write a little ticket and they take it back to the kitchen, and the developers build it and they bring it back out. And nobody's really given them clarity on this role. And so, I'm most familiar with the pragmatic marketing framework, which is, covers a lot of scope. And you could use that framework or the serious framework or, any of the others and look at cherry pick them for what are the things that really apply to us. The pragmatic model may be fine for, say an enterprise SaaS company, but maybe one of the other models makes more sense for a hardware company. I don't know. And I guess what I found is that no framework perfectly matches anyone. I mean, in all my time at Pragmatic, I'd say at least half the time, I would see people who had gone through the class, bring it home, and then modify it for their own requirements, which totally makes sense.
Yep, on that.
One size does not fit all. And, I'm sure we've had the same thing with Scrum. I know that so many people I talk to say, we're doing a new form that we call Agile, but it's sort of Agile, but not always, and there are people who say, you have to follow Scrum right out of the Bible. It's the 6th book of the Pentateuch, right? And I look at it as, here's some really good practices. And, in SAFe, there's some really good practices in there. And you look at, I think you want to look at all of the practices and say, which one really works for us? And so I've used this framework as a way of orienting all the things we could do into the ones that are really necessary for the business that we are.
That's helpful. Thank you.
Yeah, Chuck has a question, but I think we just have 1 more minute. So Steve, would you like to take that question in the Wonder Me?
Yeah, that'd be great. And thanks, Chuck.
Yeah.
That's a really hard question. So it'll be a good one for me to stumble around on in the Wonder Me room. So yeah, let's do that. I'll meet you over there. I'm Steve Johnson. My company is Under 10 Consulting. I'm also speaking later on today on the panel, and I hope to stay connected with you. So see you in the Wonder Me room shortly.
Thank you, Steve. It was a wonderful presentation.
Thank you.
Okay, it's 10:40, so I think we can get started. So welcome everyone for the second session of this Blue channel. So we have John with us talking about how to develop a career roadmap. John, you can take it over.
All right, thank you very much. I guess before I start, I should certainly thank the sponsors. I have had the opportunity to work with all kinds of product camps with Jason Brett in Atlanta, folks up in Boston, Nashville. But what I've always found is beneficial at product camps is learning from other folks. And I've certainly used product camps, the companies I've worked with, to fill those gaps, maybe skills or aspirations. So take the time to engage some of the folks that make this happen, from the volunteers and the sponsors. And today in this session, I'm going to spend some time really drilling into how do you create a career roadmap? What are some common insights that you might get around stats or different paths forward? And I don't know what your path was into product management, but mine was pretty weird. I started out as a business analyst, and well, I should start. My background is geography and geology. I got an undergrad in political science. Somehow I ended up at a software company doing business analyst work, and in walks the new leader of our organization post acquisition, and people are getting invited into rooms and not coming back. So I get invited to a room, and the gentleman says to me, "You know what? We don't really have business analysts, but the closest thing we have for you is a product manager." And so I was just happy that I had the opportunity to learn on the job. And I would say that my path has been pretty circuitous, different industries, different geographies, and the like. But I will say that I always had kind of, what is that next step? What's 3 to 5 years look like? And I don't know what your career path is and aspirations, but in many teams and many individuals, the career path that people are thinking about really is that sort of linear, I'm going to start an individual contributor. I'm going to, then manage teams or multiple products. And then as I ascend up that career path, maybe someday I'll be CEO. And that's a great thing to think. And if you're going to have that plan to ascend that hierarchy, as Ken Norton put together here, you just need to figure out which path you want. I'm not sure there's just one, but the path always starts with just at least acknowledging or understanding that why do I want to be a product manager? I think there's lots of examples, both good and bad, of people pursuing product management for the wrong reasons. I think, but we all have to have aspirations for the future, right? We got a blue sky. We have to figure out kind of what the next step is. And I always wonder in life, in my career, and a career path starting in product management may end up in operations. I've had the luxury of being a chief operating officer a couple times. But I also like watching folks trying to learn about the discipline or figuring out how to break in. Lots of folks are chatting online. This is an engineer thinking about how to come into product management. There are other folks with different skills that I want to be able to use my past experiences around design. And some folks are like, you know what, I've got an education, got a passion for this. I want to figure out what product management is. And I don't know what the drivers are. You want to be creative and be a designer. You want to take ideas and turn them into products. That's an exciting process. Maybe, it could be you just hate development, right? And you're like, can I not develop products and write code anymore? But whatever your reason, make sure you know where you are and make sure you have an understanding of why you're there. And I really hope it's not just about the money. I mean, there's lots of certainly upward projection opportunities in product management. But if it's about money, I think I would offer that it'll be a fairly unfulfilling career path. You got to have a passion for what you're doing. You've got to have an understanding or at least empathy for the people you work with in their roles. And if you know, look at these numbers, they aren't that big. I mean, there's probably Amazon warehouse workers that don't take stress home, that make this kind of cash in some geographies. So do it for the right reasons, because if you're doing it for the wrong reasons, you won't be able to relax or maybe enjoy your life. And there's a little piece of research here from Pendo. They just released a study of product managers. Pendo is a software company. And one of the questions they asked, like, how likely are you to refer other people into this career path? And I'm telling you, 20% NPS, net promoter score, isn't that high, right? And I think one of the reasons people struggle with product management is they go into it for the wrong reasons, or the wrong understanding. And well, it could just be they've got the wrong manager, right? They don't have a leader that guides them the right way, or they're in a culture that doesn't reward product management. So you got to figure out kind of why you want to do it, and then you got to understand where you are as an individual inside an organization and people you work with. And I don't know why I put this slide in. I guess I do. I only put this slide in because maybe the stress is being overworked. Maybe the stress is a management issue, not really an individual contributor issue. And so this chart, basically from Pragmatic Institute, shows an idea of how much time people spend on tactical versus strategic. But the part I want to talk about is people are working more than 55 hours a week on a continuous basis as product managers. It's not sustainable. And so if you're all the way over in 60 and more, here's my recommendation to you: find a new job, right? There are many things you can go do where you're empowered for success. You're empowered to have a life and balance it against your career attributions or your career aspirations. And so figure out, are you at the right place? Because if you're not at the right place, it certainly could limit your success, or at least your understanding of what product management is. And so if I think about success in product people, putting together a career over time, it's about curiosity and learning. Successful product people they learn from their peers. They learn from their market, and they learn about their business. And so this is the Quartz framework. I think Steve just ran through it in his last session. But at the center it is, how can I understand, have the context, the empathy of my market? And when I take that knowledge at the center of those folks I want to delight and ultimately take money from as a product lead, I will find new things I can, discover, new opportunities. And then I got to learn what my business cares about. What's their strategy? How do they analyze investment? And those are different skills, different tactics. But if we can get things committed, funded, then we can share our vision. We understand where we're trying to go. We understand where we are today, and we put together a plan, a roadmap, a release plan. We put together some content, epics and stories, and we hand that off to the folks to create the best product. And once that product is on the shelf, then we're going to deliver it to the market with stories and targets and audiences. And we're going to measure that and connect to create the right beliefs. And central to that is what our users care about, what our business cares about, what our peers and partners in the market, our buyers, care about. But each one of these parts of this framework have different activities. You know what? Some people like things better than other people, and they prefer to work with marketing folks. Maybe that puts you on the far side, the connect and deliver. Sometimes you want to be creative, work with the business, do innovation. That puts you in the discovery phase. But you need to understand that there's different roles, there's different activities. And the first part of effective career planning is figure out what you like, right? Where do you excel? Now, that doesn't mean that you're going to have things you don't like, right? I don't know that, I like doing sales enablement over my career, but I knew it was something I had to do, or at least get proficient at, as I went up whatever path worked for me as an individual in the teams I've managed. And so first question you need to ask is, where do you want to be? Do you want to focus on business activities? Do you want to build product, work in technology, or if you're a software vendor, hardware vendor? Do you want to go tell stories? And underneath every single one of these sort of segments on the Quartz framework, or whatever framework you use, there's different paths, there's different titles, and there's different skills you need to develop. And so, as you can see in this particular chart, the business, the tech, and the marketing, they all kind of have a similar set of levels, VPs, contributors, etc. And so first anchor out on where you want to be, and then be introspective to say, where are my gaps to ascend the next step? And there's not just one path. I mean, Ken Norton did a great piece in his newsletter just this week, talking about maybe we should have 3 tracks: a technical track, a business track, and a marketing track. And we can extend whatever hierarchy works well for us, but then ultimately develop and deliver the single path for us as individuals. I mean, my path from geography to product management to consulting and operations was always developed on what's the next step? What's that next goal I want to achieve as an individual, and partner with my teams to make us all successful. And so how do you fill those gaps? That's it's always a question. There's some interesting insights online. And one of the set of insights that I really like is there's a gentleman, Greg Pickrell, has put together a product management group on Facebook. And this question of, should I get a certificate, get some training? Will it get me a job? And I love the response. Absolutely none will get you a job. But they might give you the concepts, the common language, and in some ways a shared experience of how you work together. They can be useful, but they aren't determinative, right? And so you need to figure out the right kind of training. If you want to be technical, maybe you go get some Scrum training. Maybe you do some SAFe training. If you want to follow the business path, maybe the type of training you need is financial literacy, or going to do some work around RevRec, and getting an MBA might even be something that's interesting for you. Maybe you want to go get a marketing degree. But learning doesn't need to be formal to be meaningful. And every organization you're in offers an opportunity to learn, because success in different cultures requires different skills and develops different skills. Here's a piece from a product management festival. They put organizations into 4 different buckets: startups, agile, chaotic, and bureaucratic. And to succeed in each of these types of cultures, you're going to have to develop different skills. In a startup where kind of things are always changing and ad hoc, you got to be a little bit comfortable with real-time prioritization, quick and significant changes in what your strategy and your plan is. And often there's a lot of overlap between different roles, because we're all wearing a lot of hats, very utilitarian. So that's kind of like more of in many organizations, a generalist requirement. You may live in an agile organization. I think agile as a discipline helps companies. It makes folks accountable. It develops trust across teams as we get together, collaborate, as we put together plans and execute those plans as leaders. But the most important one isn't just accountable. To be accountable, you also have to be empowered, have the right systems, the right tools, and the right data or insights that we've learned from the market or our business to make better decisions in a frequent way. In chaotic organizations, here's what I learned in chaotic organizations. I don't like them. And so I find myself a little more towards agile or bureaucratic. But I have learned things in chaotic organizations, prioritization. Developing small teams that work together, and as a small focused team organized around a well-articulated goal, it's amazing what you can do in some organizations that on the surface look chaotic, but that means you as a product leader can bring a little bit of order to your team by sharing data, by telling stories, by creating a vision that people can rally around and understand. And then, of course, as organizations grow and get larger, you need a little more bureaucracy. And in a bureaucratic organization, often you learn finance activities. You're doing a little bit more math than you might be doing in some of these other organizations around it. Return on investment, thresholds for break even. And there's not a good or bad culture here. They all can be successful, and they can all be a place to learn. Learn tolerance, learn prioritization, learn empathy, but also shared experiences. And I guess as a shared experience in most product camps, I don't know if you've had this before, but I don't think you can go through a product camp without a Steve Jobs quote. And so we have a quote that is attributed to Steve Jobs about good artists copy, great artists steal. And I use this here because we can steal things from our peers in the culture, both good and bad. And so look around your team, look at what you're trying to accomplish as a business, and put together a plan first for your role today. A roadmap requires success today to drive success in the future. And so find those partners, those peers that for good or ill can teach us and that we can copy and emulate. In fact, in many ways, fake it till you make it is inherent in good artists steal. Let's figure out who we can model. In fact, I would offer also that Steve Jobs was pretty good at it because the actual person that said it was Pablo Picasso. And yet many of us historically credit him as coming up with that. And it's really about learning the concept. How can we learn from others and find that path forward? And if we're really going to learn, maybe we want to make sure we quote it the right way. Good artists borrow, great artists steal. And as you work through your next steps, as you work through your plan, find a guide. And I don't know the right mentor for you, but I'm pretty sure it's not a random person on the internet, some rando that did a Facebook internship and got whacked at Google in 18 months. Step back and look at the mentors on your teams, your developers, your VPs, these people that are inside the organization that you're at today are great guides and resources to take that next path. And they'll also be honest with you because you've worked with him or her, you've received a level of trust, and they'll provide honest feedback because they've seen you in action. In fact, your guides are going to swap out as quickly as you change jobs or roles and goals along ascending that traditional hierarchy from individual contribute. I mean, if that's what you want to do, right? I don't know that you need to do that. That's, I think, Ken Norton's core argument in his newsletter this week. Pick a path for you. And if this traditional hierarchy up to business is what you want to pursue, then at some point you have to start letting go of the technology and start thinking about a business. And as you ascend higher in the organization, directors are managing people and executing business issues on the behalf of the VPs. Some skills, they will change over time and what's required for success. And what this slide shows from 280 Group is that as you move up, you're going to start thinking about pricing, business activities, and strategy. If you're talking about backlogs as a VP, then maybe you're having the wrong discussions, right? Figure out how you can develop the right skills to ascend whatever ladder you have. Because Norton says this: people should be encouraged to design their careers that align with their values and help them find fulfillment. Values aren't just work values, they're personal values, they're aspirations and the like. So how do you develop a career roadmap, and what is it? Easiest way to talk about a roadmap is it's a way for us to align activities, to create filters towards a goal. And it's a motivational narrative, a narrative we tell to ourselves. It's our career, a narrative and a story as we work in our product roadmaps. But the most important thing about a roadmap is it's not forever. It's 3 to 5 years. So what are you trying to accomplish as an individual, as a product person, in the next 3 to 5 years? I mean, certainly you can be audacious, right? I'm not saying don't grab something that is big. Be as audacious as is reasonable from where you are today and ultimately what you want to accomplish. And so the 4 key steps of figuring out your personal career roadmap is asking yourself in a very intellectually honest way, where do I want to be? Where do I see myself in a limited 3 to 5 year horizon? And then I got to get again introspective and try to put together a plan around what are those gaps I have and what do I need to do to fill those gaps. Maybe it's training, maybe it's read a book, maybe it's look at blogs. And then find your guides along the way, those mentors that invest in you and either hold you through tough times and empower you and celebrate you in great times. And so there is no single path, but it does start with learning. It starts about first learning about yourself, and then having that insatiable curiosity about yourself, your markets, and your teams. And I believe we are supposed to have about 10 minutes for questions. And so I guess I'm 2 minutes short from the 10-minute mark, but do we have any questions currently in the queue?
There is only one question that came up. It says, John, many people want to know the path to a PM job, but what are some paths from a PM job?
Oh, that's a great question. And so I've had the opportunity. I don't know. I'm gonna make up a number, but I think it's reasonably appropriate. I've probably managed about 300 people in various roles. I've been a COO once. I've been a CPO, and I will say that folks in product management, they can go to sales roles. In fact, some of the most successful pre-sales engineers and salespeople I've worked with in my career started in product, right? They had that passion and that desire to learn about their buyers, and they took that into the market and crushed their career. I know a handful of folks that have become CEOs, right? I mean, that whole, path is not just not just fiction. It actually happens. Customer success, as organizations start investing more in managing the customer experience and putting together, the right metrics and systems. They're great customer experience leaders, great design leaders. Many product teams are now getting designers in their functional organization. And so lots of different ways to go. I don't know if there's right or wrong. It just goes back to what are your passions. And so if I want to go be a salesperson, I probably want to go find someone in sales as my mentor. Someone I worked well with was a product person that knows, he or she knows my soft spots. I want to go be business. Maybe I partner with the CFO, chief financial officer. A mentor I had early in my career to help me from geographer to business guy was a guy named Ken. And, that relationship with your CFO really puts a discipline and rigor with how you communicate to the executives, but also how you motivate and work with other teams. Great question.
Okay. The other question that I see here is, would love to learn more about getting those strategy skills to become a product leader.
Yeah, well, there's always a question of like, what strategy, what's tactics, you've probably been in that fight. You're in a meeting, someone's like, that's strategy, that's tactics. Strategy to me, I think we put this in some lofty pedestal that's unmerited because strategy is very simple. It's what do we want to accomplish and who are we going to work with to accomplish that, right? I want to drive revenue growth. Okay, well, what segments are we going to? Who are the buyers and the users? And so once we identified those goals, goals are central, right? You got to have revenue goals, profit goals, satisfaction goals. But once we understand those goals, then we say, all right, what are we going to do to get there and who are we going to engage? And then any of that stuff around building features, backlog, that's how we do it. That's a tactic. But first we have to understand what and what we're trying to accomplish and what's the approach and targeting. Lots of great courses out there, lots of great blogs. The internet's a powerful thing. It really is. I stole most of this content from someone online. People are out there telling the right stories. The challenge that you need to have is how do you put it into action? Lots of people have gone to training. Businesses spend millions of dollars over the course of their product training people. But the benefit comes from that is you as an individual saying what I'm going to do with it. So read a book, read a blog, take a course, plenty of stuff online.
Okay, thank you. The next question is how important do you think it is for non-technical product people to develop a tech background? And does this matter more or less at more senior levels?
Great question. Well, I'm a geographer. I wouldn't put myself in the technology camp or strong technology. I spent all my career in software and SaaS. I think, I don't know that tech chops are required, but continuous improvement on yourself is. And so as I took that next step, I learned more business. But as you go up the hierarchy, certainly it's business acumen, not technology. That's not to say that technology folks can't ascend, but they've invested in acquiring those business skills over time. And so I think tech chops might get you in at the individual contributor perspective, but as you move up, you need soft skills, need leadership skills, motivational skills, and business acumen. So I think it's less important as you go up an organization, but in some companies, if the founder's a technologist, to get into that one company, you probably got to know tech. And so as companies mature and their product teams mature, that's where they get more of a business focus. hopefully that helped answer that question.
Thank you. There was another question. I think you touched upon it, but again, I'll still read the question if you want to expand more on it. The question was more about how to find the mentors.
Yeah, I get asked that question sometimes. I don't know that there's more. I don't want to be snarky, right? But the reality is, just ask someone you trust. Right? That is, some level farther on the desired career path that you're on. I do like them to be in business and in your business and culture. Over time, as I've developed those mentors, I created what I called a career, board of directors. A handful of folks I would meet with quarterly, and we would sit around and answer each other's questions as we started working together longer. So, don't look for one, understand you'll have many, and just ask, right? All they can say is no. And, there's lots of legitimate reasons to say no. He or she, may be overwhelmed with their current job and life. He or she might have already done that historically and put his or her dues in. But it's really about asking. And if you find someone that you work with that you trust and you've got a positive relationship, just ask. In like real life, don't send a Slack message, #mentorship. That's probably not going to work.
All right, thank you. I don't have any more questions in the chat. If anybody has any questions, you can ask to John directly, or you can put it in the chat.
Yeah, feel free to add it in the chat, add me on LinkedIn, let me know how I can help. Love talking to people. And I find that working with people, no matter where they are on their career, is something I enjoy. So thanks for the opportunity to speak today, and everyone that voted this session in. Thanks.
Yeah, and John, you'll be moving to WonderMe, right, after this session?
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
Yep.
So yeah, if anybody has any more questions or want to discuss, more specifically with John, you can move to WonderMe, and John will be there, and you can continue this discussion. So thank you, John, for a wonderful session.
Hey, it
was very helpful.
All right. Have a great day, everyone. Cheers.
Thank you. All right, Amanda, welcome. I'll make you the co-host. All right. Welcome, everyone. Today we have with us Amanda Nance, who will be speaking on feature prioritization. Amanda, you can take it over.
All right. Thank you so much. Welcome, everybody. So, yes, I'm going to talk about why I stopped sending surveys and started talking to customers. Just a quick summary of what I'm going to go over today. This is a method that I use to get customer input on feature priorities. And what I love about it, I call it a structured focus group. It's easy to implement quickly. It's easier to implement correctly compared with a survey. And in some cases, I find it to be more valid than a survey. And the reason that I'm talking about this today is that neither I nor my colleagues have seen something like this presented or published for this specific purpose of feature prioritization. It is possible that some of you are already doing this, which is great. But for those who haven't done it this way, I'm going to walk you through it step by step. But first, I'm going to give you just a little bit of background how this came about. I was consulting on a UI refresh of a mature product, and I had done some previous research for this team and found some dissatisfaction with the UI refresh and some usability problems with it. However, the team as a whole, there was some disagreement on what to do next about those issues. So I wanted to help solve that with data. So what this method accomplishes and what I needed to accomplish was understand from the customer's perspective which features are most important, understand why those features were important to customers, and that would help the team prioritize along with the other inputs that they use to make those decisions. So you might be wondering, why didn't you just send a survey? There's so many great things about a survey. You get a large sample size. You can analyze the results by different customer segments. It seems like it's fast to run a survey, and stakeholders, they do love them. So I have a lot of reasons that I did not want to send out a survey. I have tested out many surveys with many customers in the past using a Think Aloud protocol. And I can tell you that doing a proper survey, it's not fast. A critical part of my survey process is to test the survey in one-on-one interviews with several different participants who are in the intended audience. So, and the reason I do that is that if you don't do it, customers may not understand your survey questions. You may be asking the wrong questions entirely. In the worst case, this all means that the data you get back, it doesn't mean what you think it means, which is a huge risk. So I just want to say, if you've never tested a survey by watching someone take it live and then doing a retrospective interview with them about it, I strongly encourage you to do this. And I hope it scares you so much that you never send a survey out again without testing it first. What's my point? I didn't have time for all of that. They asked if I could do this in 3 days, and I bargained for like a week and a half to 2 weeks. So I was very limited in my time. I couldn't do a proper survey. Also, other problems with surveys, sometimes your features are actually too complex. They're too difficult to describe quickly in a survey, and we know people don't like to read. In addition, customers, if you send out a survey, they can't ask you clarifying questions if they are a little unsure, what do you mean by this? Or they need some more details about the feature. So I needed something else. Having all those issues with surveys in my particular case, I ended up with something that took the best aspects of a focus group, but eliminated the groupthink, where of course the groupthink is the tendency that participants will be swayed by hearing other people's opinions. So I call this a structured focus group. Essentially what it is, you're gonna have 4 to 6 customers in each group. Your key questions are predetermined and they're close-ended, which is why I call it structured. And the customers answer those key questions independently, so they don't influence each other, but you still get an opportunity for group discussion. Okay, so what do you need in order to set up for one of these? You have to set up your key questions in a survey tool. You're going to create materials that actually showcase the feature concepts, because you share that on screen with people. And then you set up a remote meeting tool. You can run these in person. I've always done them remotely because our customers are spread all over the country. So everything, this next section is about how to actually facilitate the group discussion. I start with a welcome. I go over, here's what we're going to do today. I have everybody introduce themselves, and I actually put questions on the screen of what I want them to cover. An example would be your job title or your role, or how long you've been using our software. Then I ask them to go ahead and open that survey that I've prepared, and I tell them we're going to use this throughout the session to collect some of your feedback. And then I actually have them go ahead and answer the very beginning of the survey, which is just a few demographic questions that I may want to look at later as I'm analyzing the results. So after the welcome, I do an overview of all of the features that we're going to talk about on the call. The reason I do this is to deal with what's called anchoring and ordering effects, which are the fancy terms for saying that the order that you show these features in can matter and can change how people respond to them. There's a great article about anchoring and ordering effects that I've got a little reference down the bottom if you want to check that out. So I show a full list of here's the features we're going to talk about, but I don't go over them in detail. I just give a real summary level. Here's what these features are. This gives people an idea of what we're going to talk about. It's what you're trying to avoid is that you show a couple of features and some of your customers mark them as your highest level of importance. And then when they see the third feature, they realize, oh, well, that one's more important than those other two. And they might have to sort of recalibrate. So you're trying to avoid that. The other thing I do to deal with anchoring and ordering effects is I try to vary the order that I present the features in across my different groups, because I do run multiple groups. The tools can make this kind of a pain, but it is a best practice. So I've just shown the overview of the features, right? And now I'm going to move into a discussion of each feature individually, and I show a slide for each feature. It's got a brief description of the feature on the page, a mock-up if possible. I think mock-ups are super helpful because they help convey the concept. You don't want different people envisioning different things in their minds. But I do make sure I tell them, usually these mock-ups are conceptual in nature and all the details have not been worked out. So I make sure that they know that, so that, you don't get feedback like, well, I would only use this if you have this certain field in this table. Because we're not really at that stage yet when we're doing this kind of research. So, all right, so you show the slide. It's got a brief description of the feature. I read a detailed description of the feature verbatim. For me, it's important to read it verbatim so I don't mess it up and insert any of my own opinion and I want to be consistent across the different groups how I present these. So these are a few guidelines for how to write those detailed descriptions. I think they're the ones that you read out loud. They should still be concise. I say max 3 to 5 sentences. They should be neutral. So you're going to say what it does. And I think it's great to give an example of how it can be used, but you don't want to say, here's why it's great. Here's the impact of having this feature. That's for the customer to tell you. So you just try to keep it unbiased and just what it does. And then I iterate on these descriptions. If I find in the first group somebody asks a great question and I didn't cover that point in my description, I update my description so that for when I run the next group, it's a little more clear what the feature is. So here's a quick example of how not to write and how to write a detailed feature description. Obviously, it would actually be longer than this, but in the first one, this feature allows you to search by employee number. This helps you more quickly access an employee's profile. So that second sentence, you don't want that. It sounds like you're trying to lead them to like the feature. So leave that out, just tell them what it does. All right, so the key to this method is getting independent responses from customers before you have a discussion. So what I do at this point, I've gone over a feature, I've said, here's what it is. And then I ask, does anyone have any clarifying questions? And I'm really clear with them that I don't want you to state your opinion right now. I only want you to ask if you're unclear what the feature is or does. And I say, because I don't want you to influence how other people rate this item. And I say, we're going to talk about it in a minute. I want to hear your thoughts on why you rated it the way you did, but just, only ask clarifying questions right now. So, and then I have them go back to that survey and answer a question about this feature. And this is the question I use. You can use a different question if you don't like this one. I like this approach because it's simple and it's one question per feature. I ask, how important is this feature for you? And then, down the left, in the survey, you're going to list a short name of each feature. They're going to mark it's critical, it's important, it's nice to have, or I don't need it. I have found that customers, I've never gotten questions about what do these terms mean? Well, what do you mean by critical? And also I have customers who they'll mark some features under critical, some under important, some under nice to have. In other words, it seems to be working well from my standpoint, the times that I've used this. But again, if you have a different question you want to use as your key question, that's great. So, okay, so we do that key question for the first feature. And then we start talking about it. So I tell them, that survey was for your gut impression. I would, as we start discussing, I would really prefer that you not change your survey answer. And then I ask for someone to tell me, how did you mark this feature and what are the reasons? I actually call on people by name. This is for a couple of reasons. One is when you got a big group, and especially if it's online, it keeps people from talking over each other. People don't like to talk over each other. I think it makes it feel a bit more, I think it makes people feel more comfortable that they know when it's their turn to speak. And it also helps when you're doing analysis. And if you happen to have a note taker, they know who's speaking, they can put that in the notes because it's really important actually to know who said what. And when you're analyzing, when you go back to the recording, you want to make sure you know who's talking. So it just saves time. If you just call on people, you know who's speaking. So at this point, that's the sequence for one feature is, the independent, you describe it, the independent survey response, and then a group discussion about it. You do that same process for every feature that you want to discuss on this call. Optionally, you can also have people rank these features. After you've gone over all the features, you would do this and say, now that you've seen them all, please rank them. You have to set up your tool to allow them to do that. I'll be honest, I've stopped doing this. You can use ranking to break ties, but I use this method for, let's say on the small sample size. So I don't know that you really want to use ranking to break a tie. I would actually recommend that you just consider your other inputs that are outside of customer opinion, such as, well, which segment are we really trying to please with this next release? So you can do this. I think I'm kind of abandoning the ranking myself. All right, so you do that for all the features, and that's pretty much the end of how I run the call. I do run multiple groups to get a sufficient number of participants. So I typically, for a feature prioritization project, I'll run 2 to 3 groups. It's always hard to give a guideline. How many participants do you need? But you do need enough that you can see trends. And my rough guideline, I'd say 12 to 15 participants total. Because again, you're trying to get directional feedback with this method. But you do want to be able to see trends. I have so far, when using this number has been sufficient for me to give solid recommendations on what's most important to our customers. So what's next? Okay, you've got all the data. You need to analyze it. Some researchers, especially those with an academic background, they will tell you that you need to decide your analysis method ahead of time so that you don't introduce bias in your analysis process. But we're all working in different contexts. So, and I don't personally work that way. I think you use your judgment in your context. Do you need to be that rigid or not? I am personally more of an exploratory researcher. I really like to get all the data, look at it in multiple ways to figure out what does it mean. And to be honest, when I look at it multiple ways with this kind of study, I usually get the same result no matter, or a very similar result, which is quite convenient. You don't have to make any further decisions. And I would also just say, you'll see this when I talk in more depth on how I do the analysis, but I'm not just looking at numbers. I'm not just adding up, okay, which feature has the most critical votes. I'm also trying to look at patterns. So the first thing that I do is look at statistically, it would be called the mode. It just means where are the most votes. So in this example, I don't know if you can read the numbers, but the most of the votes, or the most votes, occur in the nice to have. So I think, well, that feature is probably just a nice to have. The next feature, it's more on the critical side. The most votes occur in critical. And then this final feature, not clear. It's kind of spread across all the categories. What does that mean? Why did that happen? Well, let me talk about that one. This is real data from one of my studies. Feature C. So I realized, oh, it's got, some people said critical and some people said they don't need it at all. Why? Feature C was a targeted search feature. Our enterprise customers who have really large data sets needed it because in their search results, they were getting lots of results back without this particular method of searching. Smaller customers didn't care as much because they didn't have as much data that they were dealing with. This is where this method, one place where this method shines. I got that from the discussion, listening to people talk about why they needed or didn't need that feature. And I honestly think if I had run a survey, it would have been harder to make that connection. Yeah, you could have made it. You could have done a segmentation by customer, done an analysis by customer segment, but it was so much easier just hearing people talk and saying, we have 3 John Smiths, I need a better search. So getting the why is one of the reasons that I really love this approach. And probably everyone here already knows why you want the why, but I'm just going to go over a few things that I've observed. One is what I just said. It's so easy to see trends. It was so obvious by just in hearing customers discuss these features that searching in this particular way was more important to the larger customers. Next point, seeing other ways to think about the solution. You really aren't going to get that from a survey so much. I'd be shocked if you did. One of the features we got feedback on was about customizing the information density on a page. So by default, there was a lot of white space and people were complaining about too much scrolling. You know, they wanted a more compact view. So in the customization feature, there was it was like the ability to customize how dense your layout would be. When I brought back how popular it was that people wanted to customize and make the layout more dense, the team said, maybe we don't need to let them customize it. Maybe we just need to make it more dense for everyone. We wouldn't have gotten that from a survey. The final point is challenging internal assumptions. So before this research, again, I'm talking about, this is why I love getting the why. Before this research, the stakeholder had made an assumption about what customers wanted, which feature of these 3 they would want by looking at usage analytics. But looking at what people are currently using doesn't really tell you what else they want. That became more clear to them as I brought back the results from this, and I had those answers of why people wanted certain things. Okay, so how long does all of this take? I kind of already talked about this, mentioned this briefly. For a session, both of these numbers are for the same set of features. I ended up with a customer who couldn't make my group calls and I really wanted her feedback. It took me 20 minutes with her to go over the 7 features and get her feedback. On a group call, same 7 features. I ran 7 customers. It took 45 minutes. So basically, for a little more than twice the amount of time, you can get 7 times the amount of data if you do this on a group call. This is why I'm so excited about this. I do want to mention with the 7 features discussed, it does depend on the complexity of the features. These were fairly simple features that I was doing, so your mileage may vary. All right, how long from start to finish does this take? So for me, with this project, it was less than 2 weeks, which is about how much time I had. That's from start to finish, right? Is recruiting, running the groups, analyzing the data, presenting the findings. What I was able to fit in to that time frame was 3 sessions, a total of 13 participants, and we discussed 7 features. I did have a pool of participants ready, which made the recruiting easy. If you don't have that, it's going to take you longer. And conveniently, I did have people available to take notes, which makes the analysis slightly faster as well. Okay, how long would this have taken had I done one-on-one interviews, which is, typically my preferred method when I really want the why on things. I'm estimating it would have taken an extra 4 to 5 days because you've got to schedule 13 people, run 13 separate interviews, and then analyze all that data separately. Whereas with the group method, it's just easier to see those trends off the bat. Of course, if you need more participants than that, if you're looking at 20 or 30, it's going to take you even longer. So you save even more time as the number that you need increases, if that makes sense. I also find it's just easier as a facilitator to run 3 calls than to repeat the same thing 13 times and try to, be really attentive from participant number 1 through number 13. So to summarize, obviously there's more in the pros column because I really love this method. It's faster and it scales better than one-on-one interviews. It eliminates that groupthink that happens with traditional focus groups. You get to understand why people want or don't want certain features, easier to see trends, and also your stakeholders can listen into these calls. Is it more persuasive than a survey? I mean, that depends on your stakeholders, but I think it's very powerful hearing the actual customer discussion. The only cons I could think of is the sample size is still smaller than a survey. And you have to find meeting times that will work for most of those customers. So when should you use this method? My recommendation, if you've got a few competing features in mind, you have limited time to figure this out, and you're comfortable with getting directional feedback on the feature importance. Also, honestly, you have to be open to challenging your assumptions. This research did challenge my stakeholders' assumptions. I want to mention that there's a section you'll see in my materials called bonus material, and that was stuff that I thought might be of interest, but I knew that I didn't have time to cover it all in this 20 to 25 minutes. So you can check that out later if you have more, if you want to dig in further. So with that, I am gonna pause and take questions.
Wonderful presentation, Amanda. We have a few questions in the chat. If you'd like to go through them, or I can read it out to you.
If you could read it out, that would be fantastic.
All right. Tyler Johnson asked, what is your opinion about surveys delivered inside of a product, like part of a PLG strategy versus the other group settings?
Inside of a product. So at my current company, we have a survey inside of the product. To be honest with you, there are some, it's really convenient because our process to send out an email-based survey is quite painful actually and takes a long time. It's really convenient popping something up in the product. However, you are interrupting people, and the way that ours works is if they dismiss it, they can't get it back. They have to be in the mood right at that moment to answer your question. And one of our other researchers has actually asked customers about this. And some customers said that they actually prefer the email survey because it allows them to do it on their own time when they're ready. So I think there's definitely pros and cons. Like I said, though, I have used the end product, and it's a convenient way to get a quick pulse, but only if you get an appropriate response rate. I absolutely get a higher response rate through an email survey. Typically in my email surveys, I will get a 20 to 25% response rate, and in the end product pop-up. My last one, I got 6%, and I was so uncomfortable that I said, this isn't even good data. We can't look at this. We have to repeat this as an email survey. Your mileage may vary, but that's my opinion. What else we got in terms of questions?
Awesome. Let me look at the chat here.
Sure, I'll check it out too.
Yuting Chu asked, how do you deal with pushback from those who say 4 to 6 people or qualitative focus groups are not statistically significant? And he also asked, what is the, one more second here. Yeah. And what is the link to your bonus material?
Oh, so as soon as wherever the materials get uploaded for ProductCamp, you can just flip past here. I'll show you. Bonus material is back here in this same presentation. So I talk about the various tools that I use. Anyway, that's where it is. It's in the same deck. So the first question was about pushback statistical significance. So to be clear, the reason I run these groups is that I want more than 6. I get 12 to 15. Which is, I know it's still a smaller number. I honestly, I haven't personally gotten pushback on you need statistical significance, which is just a testament to the type of organization that I'm in, that they understand both qualitative and quantitative. But I think what my answer would be is, honestly, let's say if I had someone bring me a survey and they said, well, we have this other data that's different from what your data says, I would pilot that survey in front of them and I would try to make sure, like, is this actually a valid survey? Because I have had times where a stakeholder said, yeah, but we have this other data, and I looked at it and it didn't look like it was a valid survey. So I know people love numbers, but if people didn't understand your questions, the numbers are meaningless. And so I would probably have that conversation with them about, okay, but like, have you watched anyone go through this? And do you know that these questions are being interpreted the way that you mean? And I would really just question, maybe it's totally valid, right? But you have to have that conversation.
All right, Carl asked, based on your experience, do you have a recommendation on an estimated maximum number of features to cover using this strategy?
Okay, so I said that I covered 7 features on those calls. Off the top of my head, I'm going to say somewhere like around 10, because after that, I feel like it's just a lot for people's heads. But I think you could probably get away with 10. I've done this before where it was more like we were trying to determine MVP and what had to go in versus what didn't have to go in. And I feel like I probably had around 10. So that's my initial recommendation just off the top of my head. But yeah, so hopefully that helps.
Awesome. And Melanie asked, not sure what particular online tool she's referring to, but what's the online tool used?
So I have 2 different, let me show this bonus material real quick since we got a couple minutes. In terms of what the customers use to answer that survey question, sometimes I use a survey tool. Right now, what I have access to is called Alchemer, but there's others out there. I have also tried a card sorting tool, and the one I've tried is Optimal Sort. You will see in these materials, I cover like pros and cons, how I do it in the 2 different tools and the pros and cons. If you're talking about the conferencing tool, there's a million different ones, right? But what I have access to currently is Zoom. I've tried WebEx, I've tried GoToMeeting. They all have little small differences that are, that make them better or worse depending on your situation. In fact, that's also one of my tips is back here in the back is conferencing tool considerations. I personally don't like when my customers can see how many observers are listening in on the call, and GoToMeeting would let me hide that, and Zoom doesn't let me hide that. So this is just a list of things that I personally care about that you could look at when you're thinking about, which conferencing tool do I want to use?
Awesome. One last question that I see here is from Becca asking, how related do features need to be to each other?
So I think the only thing that matters is that all of the features are something that your audience would use. In other words, so for an example, I run studies sometimes with benefits administrators. As long as all of the features are things that would be in the benefits portion of our product and that these are the right people who would use those, then I think it's fair game, because you're really saying like, hey, would you rather us improve the search or would you rather us improve the display of the benefits page? But if I'm starting to ask them about some other area of the product that they don't necessarily use, then that becomes a problem. But otherwise, I think it's all fair game, because you really are internally as an organization, you may have a list of several features that are pretty unrelated, but you want to know what's most important to people if you can only tackle one of them.
Awesome. Great information. Thanks, Amanda. So a question to all attendees, if you want to ask a question, you could just unmute yourself and ask, or put your question in the chat. We have a few more minutes before the next session starts. And I also put some links in here in the chat to give some feedback by going to the survey link, as well as to WonderMe, to network with other participants along with the session presenters.
All right, I'll wait. And if there's nothing else, I could do a couple of these sort of bonus slides to just show you what's in here. Actually,
Sure,
I'll talk about this one real quick while we wait to see if there's more questions. So I talked about, you may want a different importance question, or the key question. I have tried Kano in the past. I am aware of it. I know it is meant for this kind of thing. I don't like it. I've tried it, and one of my colleagues has tried it, and I've experienced several issues with it, including it doesn't seem to match how people think. I think that customers, they just want to tell you, I want it or I don't want it, and here's how important it is to me. It seems like it feels weird to them when you're like, okay, but what if it wasn't there? Like, well, I just told you whether I wanted it or not, right? I find that the question, all those questions can confuse customers, especially the second one of if the feature is not present. Also, to my knowledge, the wording hasn't been validated. When I pilot those questions, it doesn't feel like it's been validated to me because of the way people respond. Also, it's harder to analyze. So for me, I know Kano's out there, but I just love the simplicity of just asking them how important is it to them.
Awesome. No questions so far. Oh, wait, one more question came up here, I think. Kajal asked, how do you manage when two groups of people on the call have a difference of opinion on the importance of the feature?
We just take down a note, right? It's like, okay, person A, you think this was, so I go, okay, Julie, how did you mark this feature? I marked it critical. It's critical for me because X, Y, Z. And then I go, Joe, what about you? He goes, I don't need it. We don't have, we have a small data set. We don't need a search feature. We just take it down. Like, they don't need to agree. We're getting everyone's take.
Okay. No more questions so far. We got 3 minutes before the next session.
All right, well, let me show you all real quick how I use these two different tools. So the survey tool, this one is the one I end up normally using, where I just ask the importance question. You do, in a survey tool, have to ask, at least in my survey tool, you have to separately ask how they want to rank the different features. In Alchemist, it's a drag and drop process. In the card sort tool, in optimal sort, you set up all your categories as the levels of importance. And what's really cool is when they drag a feature into the bucket that they want, they can also change the order. And so I just tell them, look, as you put stuff into these buckets, put them in the order that you want them, so that the one at the top is your most important one, and the next one's the next most important to you. So that way I get the ranking, but it's basically seamless to also get the ranking. Again, I tend not to end up using the ranking, which is basically why I moved away from the card sort. But if you feel strongly about getting that ranking, it's pretty nifty to do the card sort. Also, the card sort is it's great if you've got a large set of features versus a few. So this was my summary on comparing those two tools.
Great. One last question came up here right now. It's from Yuting again. She asked, how do you prioritize features that work together? That is, which is more important in the car, the gas pedal or the brake pedal?
Yeah. So lucky for me, I'm not a product manager and I don't have to make the call, honestly. I assist product management by gathering lots of data and representing the voice of the customer. I think product management is so hard because you have all these different inputs and things that you have to consider. I don't have an answer for that one. I just, I make recommendations based on here's what the customers felt. And then the product manager has to take all the other inputs, including the business needs, and figure out what to do with it.
No worries. Let's see. All right. So a lot of thank yous in the chat. I think you can also see that, Amanda. I think we're ready for the next session.
Yeah, we're at time. Thank you, everyone. I will head over to wonder.me.
Yes, absolutely. All right. Is
Thanks,
Steve
everyone.
Johnson? Yeah, thanks, Amanda. Steve Johnson available?
Before we set up for our panel, which is coming shortly, we'll do I want to share a couple of slides about, whoops, the host has disabled screen sharing. Where's my host?
We need Hector's magic wand.
Hector, are you there?
I am. I don't know that I am the host because I joined, and I don't know if I joined as a host or not.
You seem to have.
Oh,
so could you make me a co-host,
so
please?
Make you a host, co-host. There you are.
Yeah, I can't handle the power of host. All right. Let's see. Yeah, okay. Well, here we are. It's been an exciting day and a half of great sessions and great conversations and great networking. I want to thank all of the people from the various product camps who put time and energy and effort into putting this thing together. In particular, I want to thank all of the sponsors, of which there are many, and you can still find their information on the website if you want to follow up with any of them. In particular, I'd like to thank our exhibiting sponsors who had virtual rooms in the exhibition hall. And that's great. They've also got prizes to share that I'm going to talk about now. Starting with the 280 group, who is giving away a seat in their class, as well as their product management professional toolkit. And the names are Kelly and Mark. So they'll be contacting you directly.
Congrats, Kelly and Mark.
Yeah. Method has a couple of workshop winners, Mike and Kelly, and they are also giving away a wonderful product book by Marty Kagan called Inspired. If you haven't read it, you definitely should. Pragmatic, our friends there, are giving away a couple of classes to Amber, Eugene, and Dan. And then Product Hired has 17 winners. Lisa through Josh. There we go. And again, they're going to contact you directly to tell you about your award. Our friends at Sequent, thank you. Winner, winner, chicken dinner. All right, we got some training workshops for Michelle, Swampnil, and Tiff, and some free books for Sophia, and the product manager's desk reference, a wonderful resource for you guys as well. And then our friends at Trig have a couple of workshops. Winners are Dwight and Chuck for a private design thinking workshop and the testable concept drawings. And to wrap this up, if you haven't done it yet, there's still an opportunity to win gifts, including $50 Amazon gift cards. We'd like to get your feedback on both the individual sessions you attended, as well as general feedback on the conference itself. So go to u10me/survey and let us know about what went right and what went wrong, and mostly what went right. I love criticism as long as it takes the form of unqualified praise. So I hope you've had a great product camp, and we are now going to shift gears and talk about product management trends and predictions. So I'm going to turn it over to our moderator, Hector Del Castillo. Hector, it's all yours.
Well, thank you so much, everyone, and welcome, everyone. I want to make sure that all of your panelists are on and are able to display their cameras. I believe that is the case, but let me know if you're having problems, if you're one of the panelists. And I will begin sharing my screen and also go through some brief introduction about today's discussion. So I'd like to welcome everyone to today's discussion, and this is going to be an interactive discussion regarding product management trends and predictions. And we have 4 expert panelists who I have a pleasure of moderating today's discussion. And I will, before we go any further, I would like to ask each of the panelists to introduce themselves, and I will call them out by name. Then if you can introduce yourself, we can then begin with today's discussion. So Steve, you're first by alphabetical order. So can you introduce yourself real quick?
Alphabetically first. Let's keep that in mind. Well, I'm Steve Johnson. I've been in product management for about 25 years as a consultant. And I've been pretty much behind the scenes in a lot of this particular product camp. But most of my work is working with teams, helping them implement the best practices of product management, including product ops.
Great, thank you so much. Rich, your turn. Is Rich here?
Rich is on mute. I have that t-shirt.
I just made you a co-host also, Rich. I thought you were already, sorry. So you should be able to unmute yourself. You're muted.
No. He's having a mute on his side.
So let's move on. Rich, work out your details. I'm going to move on to David. David, can
okay, yeah, am I back?
Yes, you are. Yes,
okay, sorry. Too many changes. So yeah, I don't know if you can see me, but I'm actually wearing a shirt from the 2008 Product Camp, which was the very first one, Sunnyvale. Some of you were there. These days, I coach heads of product. I drop in sometimes as a smoke jumper head of product if somebody's forgotten to have one. Some of you have been following my blog for the last 20 years, and I go way back. So like some other folks on the panel, I've been doing product management since fire was invented.
Welcome. David, you're next.
By the way, Rich's title of Smoke Jumper, I think, is up there in the top 3 of coolest job titles ever. And it made me seek him out, a couple of decades ago to say, who is this guy who jumps into the flame? Anyway, I'm with Rich out in Oregon. That's Haystack Rock behind me, not just in Portland where I am, but greetings from the left coast where we are 3 hours behind you guys this morning. Like Rich, and I guess most of our panelists, I've been doing product for a long time, came up through the ranks. I was an engineer once upon a time, and then came to the dark side. Big companies, tech companies, chips, silicon software systems, went up through product, led product for years in senior roles. And then I guess about 2 years ago, did a left-hand turn into chasing my passion, which was helping product managers and product manager leaders and teams just get a hell of a lot better. Because anybody who's been doing product for a long time, like Steve and Rich and the rest of our panel, know just how much we need to improve. Let's see, I'm wearing a ProductCamp shirt too. I founded ProductCamp Portland back 10 years ago, and I co-founded a much smaller version of today's ProductCamp called ProductCamp Cascadia, which is Portland, Seattle, and Vancouver. We did earlier this year. So I'm delighted to be here with you because it's Saturday. If it wasn't with you, I'd be out doing my lawn. We're gonna have some fun. Thanks for inviting me.
All right, well, thank you so much. And let me introduce myself. My name is Hector Del Castillo, and I am co-organizer of ProductCamp DC. Steve Johnson and myself were actually founding speakers of ProductCamp DC, and we actually started organizing ProductCamp DC as of last year, and we're now meeting online. We've been meeting online on an ongoing basis. And as we were talking about our involvement in other product camps, because we both have attended product camps around the US, North America, and we were talking about being part of this first of its kind product camp online, a collaboration of 8 different product camps in 10 different cities. And we wanted to have this panel of discussions of people we know that have been like us working in product management for decades. It seems like we were basically, we started in product management since like the 20th century, and we're now well into the 21st century.
Oh,
and so today's discussion is going to be about how we have seen, this evolve, and what are the trends that we're seeing are going to be impacting product management and their teams, and also predictions about where product management is going to continue going. And for that, we actually have asked many of you who pre-registered to give us your questions. And so we have some prepared questions, but we are going to have a Q&A, and actually would like to let you know more or less what the agenda is. I shared that via the chat for everybody so that everybody can see where we're at. We're going to spend a few minutes on each question. I'm going to give everyone in our panel an equal chance to respond. And we're going to go through some predetermined questions, so to speak, but we're also going to have a Q&A. So if you have any questions that you did not submit, or you want us to cover anything as we go ahead and feel free to submit your question using the chat window. We'll be monitoring the chat, and then we'll be doing that in the last 10 minutes or so. We'll have a chance to maybe introduce a couple of questions from the audience in real time for our panelists. So first off, I want to take this question and talk about some of the trends that we've been seeing, how product management is a role that has been evolving, and in my view, it's going to continue to evolve. That's the nature of the role. And we're going to talk about trends that are impacting product managers and their teams now that we are post-COVID-19. And I would like to ask JJ to be the first one to respond to this question.
Thank you, Hector. I didn't actually introduce myself, so Hector didn't allow me the chance. So my name is Chopped Liver. I'm just kidding. Quick intro, JJ Rorie. I'm a VP at Sequent Learning Networks. I've been in product management like most of us for many years now. Worked at companies, financial services, healthcare, et cetera, like David, have really found my passion helping organizations get better. So trends, what am I seeing? It's interesting. I am seeing, and it makes my product nerd heart happy. I'm seeing an increased awareness by organizations across industries and leaders within those organizations of product management, what product management is, the function being central to success. And so over the last few years, we're seeing more and more of that visibility, which is a wonderful thing, because what that's going to do, hopefully, is decrease some of the confusion around what product management is and is not, what the product manager should be doing and should not be doing. That's a really good trend for us in the product manager seat. Quick tidbit, we've just recently done some research, and about 18% on average of a product manager's time is spent with the customer. Okay, so I'd like to see that a little higher, but okay, 18%, not too bad. But if you dig deeper into that 18%, over half of that time with our customers is spent on selling products or addressing operational issues. And frankly, that's not what a product manager should be doing. So I'm hoping the trend that more and more organizations are embracing product management is going to lead to more clarity around what the product manager role is. That's one of the best practices. Organizations that are great in product management understand and really clarify that role. The PM is the market-focused person, the customer advocate, the expert on the problem, not the solution, right? And then they build the ecosystem around that. So that's the first trend that I'm seeing that's a positive thing for us in product management. You know, I think in conjunction with that, kind of recasting the product management organization is the rise in product operations. I'm sure we've all heard about that, learned about that. There's still some, I think, confusion on what it is and what it can be, but I think that's kind of a second big trend that we'll continue to see. Can we as organizations allow a group of folks or a kind of sub-function within product management help the engine of product development? Can we get more efficient? Can we understand the work streams and the handoffs, and thereby allowing product managers to, you know, wear more of the strategic hat and less of the selling products and operational side of things? And then finally, I think, and Hector, you alluded to it, we're not quite post-COVID, but hopefully we're on the better side of things. And I think the last year and a half has proven that, you know, remote teams and hybrid, you know, remote and in-person teams are here to stay. I think a lot of us have been remote for a while. But those of us who haven't, I think as a product manager, what that means for you is you're going to have to double down on those soft skills of influence and communication and collaboration and relationship building in this hybrid kind of remote world. And if you haven't done that before, you're going to have to evolve those skills to make sure that you can do it.
Great. Thank you so much, JJ. David, do you have anything to chime in regarding trends?
Sure. And, you know, what JJ mentioned about ProdOps is absolutely, you know, we can talk about it all day long, but we won't, I promise. Two other things, meta trends that I see every day, kind of up to my eyeballs. First off, you know, SaaS, software as a service, casts a big shadow over product management, right? Because we're so overly indexed by the FANG companies and companies who are digital natives. But, you know, we spend a ton of time with some of the world's largest industrial companies who are now pivoting and becoming digital. And these companies do not have what we would consider digital products, right? They are being turned on by Internet of Things. They collect a lot of data. They control valves and switches and all. And they're going through a profound difference. So if any of you work for companies who don't do SaaS software as your primary thing, you know, you're going to have to change probably more in the next year than you have in the last decade, just to, you know, becoming digital, getting close with your customers, measuring all that stuff. So that's mega trend number one. The other thing we're seeing is IT organizations also who've been perceived for such a long time as a tax and as a burden to companies and not delighting their internal customers the way all product managers have been, you know, coached to delight your external customers. That's hugely important. So IT organizations, you know, delighting in the same product management expectations, converting from project to product, so to speak. We do a ton of work with those organizations as well, because guess what? They have to delight their customers too, or else IT organizations don't get funding. So I'll stop there for now, but I mean, these are some of the big trends that I don't see I don't see slowing down anytime soon.
Great, thanks so much. Let's move on to the next question. And I want to ask this question about what should product managers do to prepare to face challenges? And for this question, I'd like to ask Rich to lead the response.
Great, thanks so much. And I think I'll pick up on one of JJ's comments there about communications, because one of the things I see over and over again, because I do a lot of coaching of not just product managers, but heads of product, VPs of product, CPOs. And what I see in a lot of places is that as product managers and product leaders, we're getting increasingly visible. We're finally either getting invited to or kicking our way through into the executive suite instead of being the folks who get the memo 3 weeks later about what happened. And that's really important because that creates both a series of challenges and opportunities for us where we as product managers, product leaders have to step up and understand the half of the company that's not engineers, right? And so unlike the engineers who they want us to run through the whole model because honestly their concern is we didn't do it right and they want to check our math, you know, on the executive side, on the marketing sales side, they really just want the answer, and if it's not the right answer they just want to escalate over our heads, right? So when I think about the challenges, you know, going forward for product folks, I think of it much more as learning how to deal with the non-quantitative side of the house that's got short attention span and just can't seem to remember what it is that we do no matter how many times we explain it to them. So, you know, things like the executive who's, you know, who both tells us we're not innovative enough and doesn't really want to give us any time for discovery or validation. You know, let's just jump right to the answer because it's in my head. And the enterprise sales teams that, you know, relentlessly go over my head when I tell them they're not getting the feature that their big account needs. And the marketing side that, gosh, they need something shiny for the next webinar. So can't we talk about Bitcoin or machine learning or something, even though it has nothing to do with our product and it's nowhere to be found in anything we're doing, that's going to get us an audience, right? So when I think about those are skills that don't really necessarily come out of the technical side of the house. How do we build those? You know, I think about planning in advance, whether that's scripting out how you're going to respond to those questions or having some rehearsal or practice among the product managers where we each take turns playing the frustrated stakeholder, so that we take some of the pain, some of the bile out of it, and we're ready, right? So the crisis happens whenever it happens, but how do we get ourselves mentally prepared for the 3 or 4 or 5 absolutely likely crises that are going to happen at random, so we're not caught flat-footed.
Great, thanks, Rich. Steve, do you have anything to chime in regarding this? You're on mute, by the way.
I always do, of course. But as I was listening to Rich there, I remembered a story that he told, and I'm going to throw this kind of back at him. And it's really helped me kind of get my brain in a new place. I mean, I'm kind of famous for disliking terrible salespeople, largely because I've worked with really good ones. And you know, yesterday, Paul, or the day before, Paul busted me a little bit saying, you know, salespeople are doing what salespeople are doing. But I wanted Rich to take a moment to talk about, in terms of like facing challenges, what happens when a product manager says no to a salesperson?
And I think where you're driving, so the definition of a millisecond is the time between when I, as a product manager, tell some enterprise salesperson they're not going to get the feature they need to close a big deal this quarter, and when they go over my head to escalate to the CEO, right? So we pretend that we can convince sales folks of things, but the dirty truth is salespeople do what we pay them to do, not what we want them to do. And we pay them to bring in deals, and we pay them to be aggressive, and we pay them to be convincing, and we fire all the ones who don't know how to escalate above whoever on the prospect side is saying no. So I don't know why we're shocked when they apply all of those exact same skills to us internally as product managers. You know, I say no, I'm in their way, we're moving up, right? So anyway, I have to love salespeople because they bring the money in, or so they tell me.
Yeah,
so very true.
Yeah, one of the things that I'm seeing on the chat is this discussion about are product owners product managers, or vice versa. And I know that several of you have this, but let me just chime in. A product owner does not equal a product manager, and vice versa, right? And product ownership is really more of a development role. So in product management terms, it's really more of a tactical role because they're working on what you're going to be working on today and maybe the next couple of weeks. Product management, on the other hand, should be really more strategic, really looking at what is next, not just at what is next during your current release, but what's next beyond this next 2 releases. you're looking out as far out as you can and trying to anticipate much of that. And I wasn't really sure if either Dave or JJ has an opinion about this issue, because I know it's one of those ongoing things that I see a lot of confusion within organizations, and I consider this to be a challenge because executives don't really understand product management when they're calling a product manager, and they want the product manager to also be a product owner.
JJ, why don't you take this one?
Okay, David. So I agree with you. It should be two separate roles. Like some smaller organizations, kind of just like in every other function, have us wearing multiple hats. It should be two separate roles, product manager, product owner, because the product manager owns the vision, the strategy, the go forward, longer term, the product owner executes on that. If it's one person, what happens is one of those, the tactical or the strategic, is going to get left behind. And it's often the strategic because, excuse my language, it's Saturday, I can say this, shit has to get done, right? And so strategy takes the backseat. So yes, two separate roles. The best way I've heard it described, and I don't really know who said this originally, but a product manager's job is to find the best product for the market. And a product owner's job is to find the best way to execute on that product, right? So it's about the market, the vision for product managers, and then executing on that for product owners.
If I could lean in just for a minute here, because I actually take a slightly different view. For me, my go-to answer here is that all product managers should spend half of their time doing the product owner job, each of them, and the other half doing the outward-facing market and discovery and customer side, because that's the way to absolutely reduce all the lost hops in between the inbound and the outbound. So I actually slice it as every single person should do half product owner and half outbound, and I call that product management.
Yep. And I think really that's the challenge, is sometimes we need to actually say no when we know that most people are pounding our inbox in our email or pinging us on Slack are asking us for spend 100% of our time doing tactical work. And it's hard because you need to then start saying no to certain things and you keep track of your time and manage your time accordingly. So I think that that's one of the biggest challenges, is that when the majority of the people in the building are expecting you to be responding to whatever's going on in the current sprint or iteration, and that's taking up the majority of your time, and you're not saying no, or you're not even looking to delegate some of these things that are more tactical when you on your own are not enough. So that's one of the things. Let's move on to the next question. And the next question is about what are some of the top desirable skills for product managers? And for this, I'd like to ask Dave to take the lead in responding.
Well, let's see, there's a number. I mean, you guys have been attending camp now for 3 days and hearing all about the important skills. I think the ones that are evergreen, and as we look into our crystal ball for next year, they're not going away. Of course, I often start with effective listening, and taking all those biases, all the things that you want your data to say, and swallow them, and just listen. We came in at the end of the last session, where we heard about great techniques for card sorting and data gathering. We have to get good at that. And if we're not good at it, we better partner up with people who are good at it in our team so that we can understand needs, because you have to understand needs before you can even start thinking about solution. So that's thing number one. Thing number two, ruthless prioritization. We joked before about the hippo. By the way, the hippo is not the African animal I'm referring to. The hippo is short for the highest paid person's opinion. It's a famous quote from Jim Barksdale of Netscape 2 decades ago. So you can't manage the hippos, unless you can ruthlessly prioritize dispassionately. When product managers walk into a boardroom and there's 10 seats around there, probably 9 of those people around the table want something from you they're not going to get, or they're not going to get anytime soon. So we have to say, yes, you can't get your thing now because this other thing will serve the greater good. Probably the other thing I would offer for now, just so we can keep moving, is this notion of knowing enough about the problem space to start ideating on solutions. Now, we all have heard, right? This is dogma, right? Understand problem space before solution space. But the fact is, my friends, the world is moving faster than ever. We cannot take 6 months to understand the problem space anymore, right? So we want to practice things like the build, measure, learn cycle, AKA the lean startup cycle, trying to get to MVP, get to an early version of product market fit, using tools like design thinking. We are not skipping over problem space. We're just collapsing the time between going from problem space to solution space. So accelerating that and starting to bridge the divide is something we all have to get much better at and do that discovery in a hell of a lot less time. Let me stop there for now, Hector. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Dave. You know, that hippo issue has caused so many problems for incumbents. So GE is the latest example of that. If you look at what the previous CEO did, even though GE and all the different business units that it has are multi-billion-dollar organizations, they were losing so much value, the holding company was. And it was all because the CEO was overruling all the product managers across the business unit. So they were making recommendations, and the CEO of the holding company just kept on making the wrong decisions, thinking that they were going to be recovering. And it took a change in leadership where now GE is beginning to recover. But GE is an example of a company that was very successful. It actually has lots of product managers in place of all shapes and sizes. And they, you know, this entire issue became this hippo issue, just permeated across all of their business units. And right now, they're still in the process of recovering. Steve, I don't know if you have anything to contribute regarding desirable skills.
Yeah, one I agree with, of course, David. I would add one more. One thing that I really worry about in some of the teams that I visit is curiosity. I mean, I find it so fascinating to sit down with a dev team and say, tell me what you're working on. And, you know, I haven't been able to code for 30 years, but I understand techno speak. I mean, and it's really interesting to hear, you know, the way the architecture works. And I do the same thing with salespeople. It's like, tell me about the buyer's journey. Tell me some of the areas that you have that are, you know, going wrong, and just being simply interested in the work that we do and the work that our colleagues work on, and the markets that we serve. I think everyone needs this skill of just simply being curious. And to add on to David Nash's quote or comment about Jim Barksdale, Jim said, you know, if you have the data, let's look at the data. If all we have is opinions, let's go with mine. And for 30 years, I've been saying your opinion, while interesting, is irrelevant. And the part that's funny about that is the number of people who thought I was talking about everybody else. And I meant, no. I meant the product managers in the room. We have plenty of opinions. What we need is some market facts.
Steve, amen.
I have that coffee mug somewhere.
Yeah, I was just looking on my desk. It's way back there, but I do still have it.
Yeah, the issue is if you're left-handed versus right-handed.
Correct. You do have to hold it in the appropriate hand.
All right, let's move on to the next one. And I'm seeing you know, some chatter on the chat. You guys can respond as panelists as well. But let me move on to the next question, and that is, what is the best methodology or tool from your point of view for product managers that they have to master in 2021? And for this, I'd like to ask Steve to lead this discussion, and we'll ask other panelists to chime in as well.
Product managers must master JIRA.
End of meeting.
Or you'll never get that CSPO job.
That's correct. No, I honestly think the number one methodology that product managers must master is customer discovery. And I agree with some of the other things that have been said now, just about you know, learning how to communicate to different audiences. Yes, but I think most of the companies I visit are lost on customer discovery. They say, I'm sorry, I'm famous for stories. Let me do a story. I was doing a session in Raleigh, North Carolina, and a person came up to me and said, you know, it's so easy for you guys in B2B to do customer discovery, but how would I do it? I sell to consumers. And I said, okay, well, what is your business? And she said, I do something or another related to online banking. And I turned to the room and I said, how many of you have done or doing online banking? And of course, everybody raised their hands. And I said, go talk to those people. And she went around and got all their business cards and then sent them a survey. I was so pissed. A survey is not customer discovery. It's validation. Go walk up to someone and talk at their face. And more than that, listen to what they say. So the top methodology or tool or method or skill, whatever it is, we need to know how to do customer discovery and not automate it. I don't know why marketing and product managers want to automate friendship, but it just can't be done. Go have a conversation with somebody.
Thank you so much, Steve. JJ, do you have any methodology from your point of view that in your opinion is a master type of skill?
I'll actually answer that in a bit of a different way. I think methodology matters in that what a particular organization chooses for their world, for their team, for their product, and be as efficient and good as possible. But every organization is different. It's different to build, an enterprise SaaS product versus a solar panel or a medical device, right? And so I work with a lot of, like David said, I work with a lot of industrial type companies or physical good companies. And the traditional type of agile isn't going to work that well, at least for not all of their product. I don't care if you're a phased and gate methodology, as long as you do it really well, you embrace some of the theories of agile and design thinking to build the best product as quickly as possible. But everybody's methodology is different. What matters is the bookend around that. The customer discovery, as Steve said, the kind of constant market analysis and, having a strategy and that's what's going to differentiate. So I don't really care about methodology, and I don't mean to be flippant, but we're all going to do different things. Best for us, it's about understanding the market, understanding the customer, and then strategizing on how to best build something for that.
Hector, could I add just a comment to JJ's?
Yes, go ahead.
If I could stand on her shoulders for a moment, I couldn't agree more. And look, everything Steve said was right. You got to get to some qualitative discovery, get the narrative, get the stories out of your customers. The challenge with that, of course, is that it's really tough to do that and scale again, and not have it take a really long time. So there's a place for both. We do a lot of customer interaction, obviously, voice of customer and other techniques, try to talk to people who aren't current customers. But I'm also a big fan of it, particularly if you have a software product or a SaaS product. If you haven't instrumented your product, if you don't know what users are doing in your product, you are flying blind. So there's also a place for quantitative data, particularly if you have large groups of users. So instrument your user journey. You would be amazed, once your implementation team turns over the keys to your customers, so many product managers have no clue what their customers are doing and not doing until they call to cancel or not renew and they churn. So there is a place for both. You, my friends, need to get good at both, or hire people, surround yourself with people who are good at least one of those places.
Great. Thanks a lot. Rich, I don't know if you have anything to say about the methodology or lack of methodology or change in methodologies?
And I'll agree with JJ and with David and with Steve on this. I think one other thing I see, and I'll call it less than methodology or even less than tool, but I think product managers need to be able to do what I think of as a thumbnail opportunity sizing, or what I call count the digits, right? So, we're all getting 100 requests a day for mostly things that make no sense or don't matter, right? And so, the ability to take no more than 5 minutes, and can I count on my finger and say, well, this is likely to be a $10,000 opportunity for the company, or a $100,000 opportunity for the company, or a 50 million opportunity for the company, plus or minus, 2x, don't care, right? It is a good way to sort the top 6 things that we should actually spend our time for discovery and interviews and find out what the world wants, from the bottom 994, which you're never going to see the light of day no matter what happens. And that's a way to resist the theory that says, okay, take all 1,000 suggestions, do a business case for each of the 1,000 items, right? Which, by the way, will all be retired or dead before you're done. So, how do we apply some good, quick, dirty judgment, some 3 numbers on a page, so we can come back to the requesters and say, I love your idea. That's a great idea. But, you're 5 orders of magnitude too short to get my attention. So come back when you have something good.
Yep. I would say that this is a challenge of product management, right? Is that, we expect that, if you want to have some sort of process, what I see is most organizations consider that process is static, and it is not. It simply is not. It keeps on changing, and actually the best organizations work hard at continuing to improve their processes and remove processes that are no longer needed. And this entails also sometimes retiring methodologies that aren't really achieving what they were achieving before. But we know this, change is a constant, right? And I believe that the challenge of product management as a role is that it must continue to evolve ahead of the business model, because we're responsible for, number one, not only understanding what is the right problem to solve that actually creates a market, or once we discover a market, but also what is the best business model to actually enter the market and become a leader, so that our product, no matter what it is, has the right business model and ensures that there's a high product to market fit once we launch. And I think that that's, saying that it's easy, but it's not one methodology. It is a portfolio of things that we have to do. And often we have to sense what the market is going so that we can actually start putting together the right solution and the right business model once we are ready to enter the market with our product. And I think that one of the missing skills right now that I see as the pendulum swings between being tactical, being more strategic, being more technical, and all these different things that happen over time as organizations are trying to figure out how to evolve the role the right way, is that there's not enough product managers today that really understand as to how to adapt a company's business model, because sometimes it's outdated, grossly outdated, and disruptors are getting really good at coming in with a much more formidable business model, and they actually end up capturing more customers much faster than a larger company. So I think that often, the methodology is really about understanding how to become really much better at defining the right business model for your product as you're about to introduce a new product that you've been working hard to introduce to market. Let's move on to the next one, and because I think this is actually going to be, does anybody have any opinions about what I just said?
But before, I just wanted to agree with what you said and extend it a little bit. What I've seen through my 25 years of consulting is the pendulum swing. When I started, product management was clearly a business role. And then about 10, 15 years ago, it had evolved more into a sales and marketing role. And, 5 years ago, it had swung all the way over to being primarily a technical role. And I'm seeing it swing back to some extent. And I think at any moment in time, you may find that, the industry in general sees, the product manager job more like brand manager at consumer packaged goods. And yet in another moment in time, it's more like, an Uber business analyst. So if you don't like the way it is now, wait 3 years.
You're here.
Oh, gosh. Nice setup for Hector's next question. You're muted, Hector. Hector, you're muted.
We don't hear you.
Sorry. I wanted to ask, actually, move on to predictions and ask JJ to lead this discussion. I will ask also the panelists to chime in with their own prediction. And if you can give me at least one, don't give me a whole list, just give me your top prediction for product managers in the next 3 years.
Yeah, so to start, my biggest one, there's a theme here, right? I think that we as product managers are going to need to continue to push the the edict that we need more time with customers and that we're the customer advocate, if you will, internally. And what I mean by that is, and actually David pointed something out really important. I'm seeing the traditional software companies that have always been a little bit closer to the customer. They had a little bit more user behavior data. I'm seeing them move a little bit more to the technical side and away from that customer. So if you're a product manager for a software company, you're going to have to stay the course and maintain your customer focus and not fall too much on the, to Steve's last point, the pendulum of I'm an engineering person, I'm a technical person. If you're one of those industrial, energy, medical device companies that historically has been more, science-based, engineering-based, and not as embraced, has not embraced that product management, we're the customer advocate, we're supposed to understand the market problems. Well, you're going to see over the next 3 years or so, your companies move you in that way. Right. Most of the folks that are industrial product managers tend to be engineers by trade, by education. You're going to have to put on your market hat. You're going to have to put on your customer hat and evolve your skills and your knowledge and your expertise that way. I think what that's going to do is it's going to converge the market and us community, the people who get together on a Saturday to talk about product management. We're going to get to learn from each other, regardless of where we come. So product managers, wherever you are, these next few years, keep championing the idea that you're the customer awareness expert in the company. Now, one quick add to that, to Rich's point earlier, we don't get to just sit in an ivory tower and be strategist and, point our wand around and say, you do this and you do this. We're executors also, right? So at least half our time is executing, but we can't let that we're market focused, we're problem focused, we're customer experts, that part of our job, we can't let that fall by the wayside. So to me, product managers, the next few years, just be that champion every day, wake up, say, I'm going to be the customer advocate today, and I'm going to make sure my peers understand that's my role.
Great. Thank you, JJ. Rich, do you have any predictions?
Sure. And I'll take it from another slice. JJ, you were exactly on point. Thanks. I'm actually seeing a thing happening with investors that's got me excited, which is that I'm starting to see at the very earliest stage, some of the private equity and venture capital firms are actually doing not just sales due diligence and technical due diligence. A few of them are starting to do product due diligence. And what that tells me is that investors are starting to finally wake up to the fact that CEOs need to have strong product managers, product leaders on their team, and they actually need to have real product strategy and real good market input. So that heartens me, because if we look at the next 3 or maybe 10 years, I'm seeing more push from outside, from the investor community, to actually do product well. And that cheers me because it's new.
Mm-hmm. Well done. I'm also seeing that with some of the venture-backed companies that I work with, and I'm thrilled by it. It was so shocking. In fact, they're like, wait, we've got to get an important person in this product chair. And I'm like, seriously? I'm delighted. I mean, it is a new change, and I think I just jumped into this question anyway. I think one of the other predictions I have for the next 3 years is an increasing importance of product ops. And I've seen 2 flavors of it. One, some number of people are talking about product ops as what I would call the business and strategic role of product management, that they're doing customer discovery and they're defining the markets and they're doing, the business strategy side. But what I see in terms of success, in terms of product ops, is very similar as to DevOps. And with product ops, in this guise, it's about standardizing on methodology, standardizing on tools, making sure everybody has access to the data they need, making sure that all the product managers don't go on the same day to interview the same person. And stuff like that, kind of a clearinghouse of the way we do things here. So if you think about, if you've got more than, 5 or 10, well, I'd say 10 product managers, they're all doing their own thing. They're all following their own process based on their last jobs. When you get to the place where all of the artifacts look different and people are complaining about it, then it's time to bring in product ops.
Hector, can I add one quick thing?
Yes, go ahead.
Sure. First, I wanted to talk with my friend Steve Johnson in front of you all because I never get this opportunity. I wanted to latch on to something that Steve said about salespeople. And I've had a love-hate relationship with my sales teams over the years, as many product managers have. But, you know, I think first off, sales, at least in savvy companies led by savvy sales leaders, sales has really changed. And the companies that get it, in fact, companies that are product-led, I'm going to come back to that in a second, have found there's a truly value-added place for salespeople, which is not going out and being the old hunters and the old, you know, drag a product manager out with you, but in converting companies who are already using your product. For example, Slack is a great example of this. Slack came in under the radar, like many good product-led products, got users before they started putting up, you know, the big paywalls. And then the salesperson had to come in, and it was kind of like shooting fish in a barrel. Once your sales team comes in and you've got 100 or 1,000 people using your product, what a great time to sell a license, to upgrade them and all. So I think the roles of sales evolves. Our role with sales, I've also seen evolve. If you're a product manager, you need to go to your sales leader, or if you don't have that juice, have your product leader go to your sales leader and say, hey, we need to talk with customers. We're not going to ask your permission. This is where we need to, this is how we get information out of the sales cycle, right? We're not there to close the deal. We're not there to listen to them bitch, deservedly sometimes, about what the product defects are. We're not there to upset anything. So I'm going to visit customer X next week. What I need from you, Mr. Salesperson, is a briefing. Are they pissed at us? You know, is there something going on? I'm not going to talk about the sales cycle. I'm going to understand their needs. And my commitment to you when I come back is I will brief you on what the customer is really thinking, what their long-term needs are. So, you know, rather than just what it takes for you to close this deal. And that's the way you can build trust and a close working relationship with sales over time. That's thing number one. Thing number two, getting back to Hector's question about trends. The other thing that's huge, my friends, is product-led growth. And again, we could go on and talk about this for hours. And Steve and I had a fun riff a couple of days ago preparing for this session. If you don't know what it is, find out what it is. It's not a buzzword. It's not a fad. It's not going away. Particularly if you have a software product, product-led growth will allow you to convert, retain, and refer more customers using your product than your sales or marketing team ever could. Because what better customer to sell something to or to upgrade to than someone who already knows and loves your product? Again, I would use Slack as a quick example. So product-led growth, learn it, do it. And no matter what your product is, you can definitely create product qualified leads. You can do in-product upgrades, all those kinds of things. There's a number of ways you can get started today without having to do everything all at once. All right, I'm off my soapbox now. Thank you.
All right, thanks so much. Let's move on to the next question, and that is, how can product managers prepare to get promoted? And Rich, you've got the floor.
Great, thanks. And I'll tick off a couple of brief things and then let everybody else lean in. I have this discussion not quite every day, certainly once or twice a week with senior individual contributor product managers about how they get promoted or how they might. Points to make. One is think really hard about whether you want that job, because the further up you go in the director and VP organization, the less actual product management you do. Ken Norton had a great post this last week about companies that are starting to put in dual career paths for folks who really want to stay as product managers. But assuming you want to do that, first thing I'd do is I'd have a chat with my immediate manager or director. You don't ever want them to get that sideways, and you get to ask how they would suggest you build skills or make networks or find opportunities in the company. They'll be your best champion if you let them. And then think about what those folks in the director jobs do that's different from what we do as product managers. So more cross-functional teams, more executive politics, more working with key stakeholders, less interviewing customers, less product planning. So, think about what those things are and find a way to volunteer. Go to your boss and say, I'm really interested in getting a chance to do some of the things that directors do, even though I'm not there yet. Which ones would you help pick me out? And can you put me into some situations where I'm much more of a leader, director kind of person, so I can test it out and other people can see that I'm doing it.
Great, thanks. JJ, I'd like to ask you to contribute from a slightly different angle, and that is, how is it that women in product management can get promoted?
Good question. Well, I mean, at the end of it all, there's still the foundation of, what Rich just said, and the idea that being a great product manager doesn't mean being a great product leader, right? So you got to work on those things that's different. So your business acumen, do you understand the business ramifications? Can you speak the language to the executives about what's happening with the product? I mean, that's number one. We just have to have the foundation. So woman or man or non-binary, et cetera, we all just have to have that foundation to be able to be ready for the leadership role. There's no secret that there's a lack of diversity in tech, and especially in a lot of the industrial types of businesses. It doesn't mean they're bad people. It just means that women haven't always had the opportunity. So for the female, product managers out there, find mentors, find women and men mentors. That's really important to internally to, find someone you can shadow, find someone you can learn from. Again, I've had great mentors and coaches who, again, were men and women. Women will have that unique perspective of, that kind of political landscape, but anyone who can help you understand how to navigate that, how to better yourself. Don't fall under the trap. While frankly, I believe it's true, and I could spend all day talking about this, but I won't. I do think it's true that we often have to work harder, look better than the male counterpart to get that view. Don't fall into that trap. Don't let that, bog you down. Just work on your skills, find your mentors, be as best as you can be, and then make sure that, frankly, if you're in an organization that's not embracing diversity, maybe you need to move. But find the right kind of balance between just being the best you can be and then kind of, flourishing as a female product person, if that makes sense.
Yes, thank you so much, JJ. Dave, Steve, do you want to chime in on this question?
Mr. Johnson, I'll tip my hat to you.
Oh, well, sure. Well, I think mentoring is really important, and I don't actually know how companies are going about doing this, because you can't really assign a mentor, as the manager here. I can't say, JJ, I want to be your mentor, or, hey, I want Hector to be your mentor. I mean, mentors are chosen, not assigned. And so, perhaps an alternative, if you don't have access to mentorship, is to join a community of like-minded people. And I remember I was doing a stint as a chief marketing officer, and I thought, well, I think I'll join the Chief Marketing Officer Forum in LinkedIn, only to find there were no Chief Marketing Officers in it. It was a whole bunch of junior Marcom people who were asking, what's the difference between an SQL and an MQL? Mm-hmm. So it's really hard, I think, to find a community. But that's what ProductCamp is all about. And in fact, I started a similar community called Product Growth Leaders, where we have generally mid-level people, senior product managers or middle-level management, talking about the kinds of things that we've been talking about today. And membership is free. Go to Product Growth Leaders and learn more. See,
Hector, can I just add one quick thing?
Yes, go ahead.
Sorry, Steve. One thing you can do to help your female counterparts, and especially the folks that are either more experienced than you or above you, is to seek them out as mentors, male mentee, female mentors. Oftentimes we don't do that. A lot of the females in product will have female product managers ask them to mentor them. we need more males to kind of highlight the leadership of women. So again, not to take us off track, but that's actually a really good thing to do for those of you out there who care about this topic. You know, actively seek female mentors, and I think it'll be good for you, but also good for the females in the organization.
Yep.
My gosh, could I
so
just add like 10 seconds, Hector?
Yes, go ahead.
Amen, JJ. I've worked for some really powerful women in my career who believed in me enough to take me under their wing. I've learned a lot, and these were women, as we reflected, who had to be better than all the men around them, right? Just to get the same gravitas and impact. And I have really benefited from that. In terms of assigning mentors, if you're a product leader or a group manager, I strongly recommend, as part of your PM onboarding plan, you reach out to your existing team and you say, hey, I have David or JJ starting next week. I would like to have a couple of mentors step up now, and just say, I would opt in. And then JJ or David can maybe pick from that person. And as their manager, I can say, hey, JJ, I can't be your mentor because I'm your manager, but here's a couple of veteran people at our company who are available for you. You reach out, see you have the chemistry with, you go off and find one who's going to work for you. I would make that part of we make that part of our onboarding plan. For every new hire, we have mentors in the wings waiting.
Great, thank you so much. Let's get into the audience Q&A, and to start the conversation, what is the importance of soft skills versus hard skills? And I would like to actually ask JJ to start, and then we can let others chime in as well.
Yeah, you know, it's an interesting question. I didn't say this in my intro, but I'm hoping my first book comes out by the end of the year, and I'm putting that out in the universe so that I actually get my stuff together and get it finished. But the book is around what I call the 5 immutable truths of great product managers, right? And we've actually alluded to some of these, and it's all about the soft skills, because everybody's processes are different. Everybody's hard skills are different in most cases, right? Or at least nuances. But the foundation of great product managers across any industry, across any product, across any kind of maturity level that you're going to find, in my opinion, fall down to these kind of 5 skill sets, knowledge sets. That's number 1, being that kind of superior or having that superior customer awareness. There's a lot of hard skills underneath that you've got to build, but you've got to embrace that I'm the customer advocate. Number 2, you got to be great at relationship building. We can't do this job without all of our partners and being good at building those mutually beneficial relationships. Number 3 is communication skills. We've talked about this. You got to tell stories. You got to use data to tell stories. You got to adjust your communication based on, you know, the engineer or the CEO. You got to master that, right? Number 4 is having that business savvy, right? The higher you up, higher you are up the ladder, the more business acumen you need. But all great product managers need a level of understanding the impacts to the business of the decisions we're making. And number 5 is prioritization, right? Not only prioritizing the things we do for the product, but the things we do in our own time, right? We're very intentional about prioritizing our time. Those are soft skills for the most part. And so, you know, to me, if I'm a new product manager, of course, I'm going to learn the processes and the function and the tools and the artifacts and all the things that make the engine go inside my organization. But underneath and parallel and on a years-long professional journey, I'm going to work on those 5 things, getting good at understanding markets and customers, relationship building, communication, business acumen, and prioritization. If I get those things, I'll probably end up being a pretty good product manager.
Yeah, and if I can just echo JJ for a second, because I think that's a really good description of how, if you're coming in as an early first-time junior product manager, you're mostly working on the technical skills, the hard skills, the transactional skills, the can I write a user story that's grammatically correct, even if it's worthless because it doesn't reflect what anybody cares about, right? But as you move up in the organization, as you get more important, as you want to be an influencer, I just see soft skills on top of soft skills. In fact, I think we shouldn't call them that. We should call them, you know, survival and political skills, because it's just never enough. The hard skills, the technical ones, are just never enough.
Yeah, amen to that. I want to, before we wrap up, I actually want to ask the audience, or tell the audience, Here's contact information. These are the URLs to the LinkedIn profiles of today's panelists, and also their Twitter handles. So you can actually follow them on either LinkedIn or Twitter, connect with them if you want, and let them know what you thought about this is today's discussion. But I also wanted to give a chance to each one of our panelists to kind of like wrap up today's discussion and leave one nugget of wisdom for the audience on how to actually become successful and exceptional in product management. So I'd like to start with JJ and then work our way. So JJ, can you please?
Yeah, gosh, one nugget. Again, work on really having a professional development plan, just like every other function or role. You've got to build your skills over time, but product management's even more chaotic and balanced, right? You got to have lots of skills. So really put a plan in place. Again, do I know the hard skills? Do I know how to write user stories? Nope, learn that. But the soft skills as well, right? And again, it may be multiple year plan, just like a roadmap for yourself, if you will. I know I hate roadmaps, but whatever. And really put it in place and say, these are the things I'm going to learn. And then to execute on that, you just tap into things like this, right? Product management's a fairly small community. We're all here to help. There's a ton of great information. There's, 4 or 5 different organizations just on this panel that are here literally in business to serve you and give you, content and help and that sort of thing. Tap into that. That's what's going to help you build the practice of product management.
Great. Rich, you're next. Thank you so much.
Sure. Just 2 brief things. One is, and we talked about it a lot, but you have to have empathy for all of the other stakeholders and folks in your organization. You may not like what they do. You may not even approve of their point of view, but you've got to reach them and touch them and understand where they come from, just the same way we do that with customers, right? Really get in their heads. And the other thing, and we're seeing it today, JJ just called it out, but I think every one of us needs to spend some time paying it forward. So how do we help pull up the folks a little further down the ladder from us, wherever it is that we are? What can we give away? What can we help? What can we mentor on? What do we know that somebody else doesn't know that we can share for free? Because in this community, gosh, we all need to be helping each other.
Great, thank you. David?
So hard to add to the wisdom from what JJ and Richard said so far. I'd offer just a couple of things, and I slacked this. I'm sorry, I used the chat tool here. You're going to experience imposter syndrome, right? My 30-year-old daughter called me freaked out last week because she got a great job and she felt like she wasn't truly prepared.
Almost done. 5 minutes.
Her 60-year-old dad just confessed he still gets imposter syndrome too all the time. So embrace it. If you're not trying new stuff, if you have no risk of failure, you're never going to learn anything. That's thing number 1. Take risks. If you're a hiring manager, or if you have any influence on hiring, try to surround yourself with people better than you. I learned a long time ago that if I'm the smartest guy in the room, I'm in the wrong room, right? So hire people who are better than you around yourself. The well-balanced product team isn't a team of experts. It's a team of people who complement each other, and that's a really important thing too. Lastly, be kind to yourself. This is a high intensity job. This job is not for everybody, right? And we come to product roles from all over the place. I was an engineer. I've worked with school teachers, people who've pivoted their lives to go into product. Whatever brought you here, seek that out and try to make that, the biggest fun part of your job that can be your touchstone on those stressful days when, you have to ship the thing and stress is high. So have fun. I had a great time with you all today. Stay in touch, and what a blast to have some group therapy time together.
Thanks, David. Steve?
Well, in my experience, friends build products and friends build companies, and enemies build documents about those things. And I think I do want to thank Hector for bringing this group of really smart people together, as well as myself, and sharing our thoughts on product management trends and predictions. This is the last session of Product Camp, and I think it's been a tremendous Product Camp. I hope you found that to be the case. If you missed one of the sessions, we're going to be posting the recordings of those sessions in the next few days as we try to parse 8 hours of content times 3 or 4 sessions. So there's a lot of work still to be done. But if you enjoyed this conference, I hope you'll reach out to our sponsors and join your local product camp and do all of these locally as well.
Great. And thanks. I want to give thank you to the panelists, and also a great thank you to the audience for being attentive and being with us. We really enjoyed this entire event, and I hope you did too. Give us your feedback and let us know what we can do to improve. And I hope that this will not be the only product camp online. That is truly a collaboration. I think the future of product management is to really start building more of a community and being more of team builders, not only team players, team builders, to actually be successful in product management, because you quickly realize that you have to be best as a product team rather than having one individual that wants to do it all, because it's just impossible. So be a great team builder and become a truly a great exceptional product manager. I want to thank everyone, and we will be seeing you again soon at a future Product Camp event. Thanks so much.
Thanks, Hector.
Everybody, have a great weekend.
Thank you, everyone. Great to be with you.